Okay, welcome and good morning. It is Monday, November 7th, 2022. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Kearns is on Zoom. I'm in the conference room and Commissioner French will be a little delayed in getting here this morning. So we expect him at some point. And then our executive management team is here as well. So we will go ahead and get started, and I need to find my topics. We're going to go ahead and get started with Mike Burgess. Thank you for being with us today.
Sure thing, commissioners. So last we talked, we had agreed to come back and have me present a draft agenda for the 2023 legislative session. I've put together something for you to look at, reflecting on the conversations that I've had with you all over the last, since session ended, I guess, last year. And then added a few items that I've heard from your staff, and then common themes for counties in general. It won't look a lot different than what we had last year. In fact, some of the language is the same that I need to change, and I'll explain that. And then as a matter of course, what I had planned to do with your approval would be to take this list today, add to it, remove things, whichever, of course, you choose, and then clean it up, get the narratives all correct, and give you a final version for your approval, probably in a couple weeks, but I don't know your schedule, maybe Thanksgiving week, you're not working. But anyway, and then in hopes of setting up the opportunity to do Zooms with legislators, maybe in December, mid-December at some point, offer a couple dates and times. We did that last year or the year before. So I think from a process standpoint, that would work well on my end. It would be a good suggestion. We've had good success with that in the past. And then I guess with Commissioner French, I'm happy to have this conversation with him another time if he's not going to make it in the middle of this. If you wanted me to wait 15, 20 minutes or something, or do you think we should just go ahead? It's obviously your agenda, your call, but.
Scott, what do you think?
If Mike's got time, Kyle can we move any of your stuff up? Is Matt Koza available to join for the ATV ordinance, and then have Monty talk about the STA?
Neither of them are on quite yet. I know they're all planning to be here in the next 5 minutes.
Okay.
Probably could do ARP.
And Commissioner, I'm happy to go. I just, certainly I don't get to dictate your agenda, so.
Yeah, no, I think having Commissioner French here would be good. So would you be available like in an hour?
Yeah, I'll just hang on and mute myself and turn my camera off. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine with us. So a couple things we can talk about though is, that we're still waiting on, we don't know what GSI, we put some items into GSI to see what
Okay.
put on their agenda. We have not seen that as of yet. So I don't know if you have.
I have not either, no.
Okay.
I mean, I saw their federal one. Jeff had sent me their federal.
Okay. So just so you know that we haven't seen that yet
Okay.
either. So, yeah, if you've got people,
We can go with Arian right now with the ARP.
Okay, so we may go ahead and move with the ARP, and then Mike, when Al comes, we'll try to just get you back in. Okay, so we're going to adjust the agenda a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and move the ARP discussion to now. So we'll start there. So Jeff and Arian, and Vicki, just so you know, Al's delayed a little bit, so we will be delaying the agenda for the legislative agenda a little bit.
Oh, can somebody give me a quick text or call
Sure.
when it's time for Mike Burgess?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have our number?
Vicki,
Okay.
which number?
I've got it.
Just call 2262.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Arian. Or
Good
Jeff.
morning. I think I'll take the first few things and then Jeff and Heather have some items to follow. Not too much for ARP this week. Our community violence interventions will be on your consent agenda tomorrow. We are reviewing the final RFP that was extended for 1 week related to water and sewer infrastructure, and it includes 18 categories, 5.1 through 5.18. We have received a number of additional responses since you decided to extend it for a week, so thank you. We will be scoring that this week, and it will be prepped for a recommendation starting your next meeting, which would be November 28th. We are working on a number of contracts, getting them out the door, and CLA has actually just launched a number of other internal features to our portal to include some pretty robust subrecipient monitoring. That won't start for us till mid next year, but to know that they've added those features is really great. The last thing I had before turning it over to Jeff is we have been asked, or I've been asked to participate as part of an ARP panel for one of the days next week at the WASAC conference. So it will be really exciting to share what we've done so far. So great work, commissioners, and it's been really fun to be able to share some of that on Spokane County behalf. Jeff, anything else for ARP?
I think that covers it.
Okay.
Okay, so then Heather and I were going to just quickly, you'll recall the conversation last week about the emergency rental assistance and the flexibility around some of those funds. So the you'll remember the sheet with the 3 things of green and the different dollar amounts. The resolution on for consent tomorrow, category 1 would be directly allocated to SNAP. Category 2 would be up for an RFP, and that one would have that preference around DV survivors and their dependents, as well as relocation assistance. So that those 2 buckets together will get us to 75% when they're awarded after Thanksgiving, would get us to 75% of total received funds allocated, which would then allow us to do category 3, open that RFP, which would be for affordable housing. And that one is 1.255 million and change. And that affordable category for housing does have a requirement that the housing serves people under 50% AMI. Anything I missed on that, Heather?
Nope, you got it all, Jeff. Thank you.
So any questions around tomorrow's resolution? So that will be, it's on consent, and we will get those RFPs out very quickly after the vote.
Okay, very good. Scott.
And then for the commissioners, Heather's been working with SNAP to bring them in on the 29th, the week of the 29th, to provide an update to the commissioners as far as how the programs have been operating with rental assistance and give a lot of data around how much has been received, how much has went out to the community, what the individual buckets are of individuals receiving them. So she's got a lot of data that she shared with them. So they'll come in and do a presentation the last week in November.
Okay, very good.
That's it for us today.
Okay, awesome.
I do have a couple broadband items, if we could do that as well before we move on, or we can save that for later, Commissioner. Okay. So just a few things. Mark Viscani, the director of the broadband office, emailed me last week assuring that the Washington State round 2 notice of funding would drop before the end of November. So we'll see. That was a pretty firm commitment, so hopefully that's good news. Another notice of funding that dropped that we were a contributor for had to do with federal BEAD funding. And that is one that has a whole other set of arrangements than the current funding. Washington State University, Petrocor, NOAANET, and then some contributions from Spokane County were part of that application. What that would mean if it is awarded and the lead applicant is WSU is that that consortium would oversee all of the supportive wraparound components of the BEAD funding, which is in the billions of dollars. And it would allow for the digital equity, the digital navigator, the workforce development, all of the people tied aspects to broadband funding. It would be managed by the awardee of that entity for the entire state. So Spokane County isn't any part of the applicant process, but we were reached out for some information. So it will be very interesting to see how that moves forward.
So just to clarify, so that Erin, that's WSU is the one who's put in for that? The extension?
Yep, they are the lead, but Petrichor and NOAANET are listed as co-applicants.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yes. One last item kind of related to this is I have learned that the part of this upcoming $1 billion drop from the federal government is reliant on the federal FCC communications output for the formula that would then determine how much our state and consequently our county would receive for this kind of wraparound portion of funding in these. We were recommended to get what's called an FRN, which would be the FCC equivalent of like a DUNS, so that we can actually review that information before it goes out. And what that would benefit us is if we have certain structures that are labeled as not eligible, whether they be houses that are barns or open spaces that actually are pre-dev for business, we have the option to correct that, which would in turn allow us to be eligible for more formulaic funding. So going to be starting that process. I don't think there's any downside to it. And it would give us some awareness of what's coming out. Any questions on that? Okay. And then lastly, I did have a conversation with Better Health Together that was awarded the $500,000 for the Digital Navigator grant, which is kind of the precursor to what I just described to you. Some interesting findings on that. Better Health Together has identified their core provider group. And at this time, their focus is going to be primarily on service mitigations, meaning the computers at the Martin Luther King Center or computer access to vulnerable populations in other ethnic groups, and just really on the ground. It does not seem that that group is ready to be a part of the construct for the digital navigator role or even the remote worker certification. So that was interesting to me. I thought that that was going to be a part of their focus, but what that does help us know is that the forthcoming money from WSU Extension for the BAT team strategic planning, we could maybe make that a focus. So I still plan to stay in touch with BHT. I'm hoping that there's opportunity, but that was really helpful for me to know that that has not panned out to be one of their focus areas, and that we might want to look at some other areas to ensure that that digital navigator certification and remote worker certification and scholarships gets out. It just might be through a different place. So I thought that was important just because of the amount of money and what the folks on the broadband action team were seeking to do. So just wanted you to be aware that that just didn't seem to be up to their level of effort at the moment. So the last thing is we plan to do some one-on-ones with you over the next few weeks. I know we've got a big holiday, and then prepare for a more formal update with the commissioners on the Public Development Authority for broadband at the 11/28 strategy meeting. So that's broadband for today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your hard work you're doing, because I know that there's a lot going on right now in broadband and trying to understand it all. So appreciate everything you're doing.
My pleasure, and it's been fun to learn.
Thank you. Hey, anything else? No? Okay, so then I think we will go ahead and move on to Kyle. I think we've got Monty and Matt and
Yep. Got a whole
everybody's here.
whole line. Yes, exactly. So we'll kick it off here with both Matts. Matt Koza and Matt Zarakar have been working together on an ATV ordinance, which I know Commissioner Cooney is probably a little bit more familiar with than the other two commissioners, but we want to make sure everybody had a briefing on what this proposed ordinance would do.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just give a real brief background. We were approached by Mr. Bowling, who is kind of the main proponent for the initiative. And basically, if we don't do anything, they're not allowed. We have to take some kind of action to make these ATVs allowed in public roadways. And we also, there is a mandate in there to coordinate with WashDOT. I've reached out to a couple people. I haven't heard back yet, so we're waiting to hear from them. But this is really for 35 and under roads, 35 mile an hour and under roads. And if you think of our state highways in the unincorporated county, that's almost nothing, arguably maybe nothing. So I'll reach out to WashDOT. It is required that we consult with them and the RCWs, but beyond that, it's just exactly what Matt Kosa is going to present to you.
And it's basically, this came to me from a citizen, just on more rural roads. I mean, for them to have ATV, on the roads. Otherwise, ATVs really aren't, as my understanding, allowed on the roads.
Yeah, this is for any unincorporated county road 35 and under is what he would like to see, the proponent. And I couldn't find a compelling reason not to go that broad with it. It seems a little unusual at first blush, but when you hear everything they're required to do, it's very much like a motorcycle or any motor vehicle on the roadway. And that kind of gives us quite a bit of comfort in terms of licensing and insurance and drivers being 16 and licensed and on and on. So Matt has quite a bit more details. I think he and I both have looked through the applicable state laws and also what other communities have done, counties and cities, and that gives you quite a bit of comfort too. So anyway, with that, I'll leave it alone.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Quick sound check. Everyone can hear me? All right, thank you. So what Matt said is accurate. RCW chapter 4609 provides that wheeled all-terrain vehicles, and I'll go into the definition and examples of that in a minute, are allowed on public roadways in Spokane County only if the county takes some action, and that's what we have for the board's consideration. And just a quick note on the procedure, tomorrow on the board's agenda will be a notice of public hearing for this. And then on November 29th, the board can take any testimony on this and adopt it into our code if the board so chooses. So this right on the slide here is the authorizing legislation, which spells out that a person can't operate a wheeled all-terrain vehicle on a public road unless the county so acts, and that includes designated state highways and just other public roads. Next slide, please. So the definition, and there's a lot of words here, but I'll boil it down and give some examples in a minute. It's any four-wheeled vehicle, so it only applies to four-wheeled vehicles, either with handlebars, so it's like a traditional ATV, or the kind of semi-enclosed, more utility type vehicles that meet a certain weight limit and minimum and have meet some other measurements. And this only applies to wheeled vehicles, so snowmobiles don't count. Golf carts and dune buggies per the DOL do not qualify, and I believe that's because they don't meet the measurement and weight requirements. Next slide, please. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. Various versions of these types of vehicles are what the ordinance would apply to. Next slide, please. So pursuant to the RCW, chapter 4609, there are certain procedural and licensing and other physical requirements that the vehicles have to meet in order to be eligible for use under the statute and then under our proposed ordinance adopted pursuant to that statute. And they really mirror the requirements for other vehicles, cars and motorcycles. So they have to be titled, registered, they need a license plate, a person needs a driver's license to operate them, a person under 16 can only do so if they're under the direct supervision of someone who's over 18, that type of thing. And these are all DOL requirements. So the county doesn't have to deal with this. The person who wants to use their WATV goes to the DOL and takes care of all this. Next slide, please. And these are the physical vehicle requirements that a person has to show that their vehicle meets in order to operate it under this statute and ordinance. So basically all the standard equipment that a motorcycle or any other vehicle needs to have: headlights, taillights, etc., spark arresters, and all the standard stuff here. And this, I think, when we first presented this, or the Undersheriff John Knowles a while back weighed in on this, with his only concerns would be, well, what are the safety requirements for this? Some vehicles don't necessarily lend themselves to use on a public roadway. And this is what the statute requires, and what in turn our ordinance will require for vehicles to be operated on roads in our county. Next slide, please. And I'll just say, in order for a person to get licensed and permitted get their vehicle eligible for use under this ordinance, they have to go show the DOL that their vehicle is eligible for use under the statute, that with all the requirements the statute has. That includes, they have to be either sold or they have to be sold by a licensed dealer that's licensed through either, I think it's the state patrol, or have a license from a repair shop. So there's a paper trail from beginning to end for all these vehicles that shows them available or eligible for use under the statute. Just like any other vehicle, the person has to have the proof of insurance and the registration on their person or on the vehicle when they're operating it. And one of the state requirements is they have to sign a release of liability for all the state and municipalities in order to do that. And they have to obey the traffic laws, speed limits, etc., that everyone else has to obey. And as Matt indicated at the beginning of this only applies to public roadways where the speed limit is 35 miles per hour or less. So if it's less, then they have to follow those traffic laws. They can't be driving on the shoulder in between vehicles and all that. They have to act like a normal vehicle. Next slide, please. So pursuant to the statute, much like any other traffic violation, if they're operating a vehicle inconsistent with the chapter, so for example, they don't have a license plate, they don't have the required safety equipment, etc., they don't have their registration with them, then that's a traffic infraction under the statute, and that's dealt with just like any other traffic infraction. If for more serious violations, like if they're endangering human life, or they're hunting from a wheeled all-terrain vehicle, and there's special restrictions for that, then that's a gross misdemeanor. Next slide, please. For other jurisdictions, this is, since the statute's been adopted, a number of other jurisdictions have allowed this. As you can see, 17 other counties and at least 90 cities. That number is probably bigger now. The last number I saw from earlier this year, I counted about 90 cities. And in the list of counties, I underline the ones that have a population bigger than Spokane County, just for the board's information. So this isn't purely a small rural county thing. And I should note that for counties under 15,000 people, and there's only a few of those in our state, persons are allowed to operate wheeled all-terrain vehicles without the legislative body of those counties acting. Those smaller counties can restrict, like designate roads to that aren't eligible for this, but in some small counties, it's just by operation of law, persons are allowed to do this. I note that Spokane and Spokane Valley are not among the cities that adopted this. So this will only apply to unincorporated Spokane County. If someone wants to operate a WATV in Spokane or Spokane Valley, they need to take that issue up with the legislative bodies of those cities. Next slide, please. So these are just some other helpful resources I found helpful in researching this. The DOL has a very clear, basically checklist of what a person needs to do in order to make a vehicle eligible for this. MRSC, as always, has a helpful article. And then that last link is like a WATV enthusiast interest group that has kept tabs on this. So they continually update the map and list of jurisdictions that go through this. And Ron, do you have a copy of the ordinance itself? If not, I'll email it to you right now.
No.
Okay, I'm going to email it to you right now, and then you can put it up for the board to review. All right, that's done. So I'm done with the slideshow. While I'm sending over the ordinance, proposed ordinance, does anyone have any questions for me?
I guess my question, just to confirm, Matt, it seems everything you've explained here is laid out in state law. It doesn't really seem like there's anything that the county gets to decide how far you go or not as far as laying out this ordinance. Is that correct? It's either we allow it under the state guidelines or we don't.
The aspect of this that the county can restrict is the county can designate roads that are or aren't eligible for this. And some other counties have done that.
Mm-hmm.
After consulting with our engineering department, we didn't see any reason to restrict that. So the ordinance that I've drafted basically would adopt this policy in Spokane County to the maximum extent allowed by the statute. And comparing our proposed ordinance to other counties, that's really the difference. A lot of other counties will say either this is only eligible on these certain roads, or it's eligible on all these roads except for these ones. And like I say, our engineering department didn't think that was necessary here. So the way I drafted this adopts basically what the statute says, including the definitions and requirements. So can you scroll down a little, Ron, please? Thank you. As I said, this applies only to unincorporated Spokane County. The ordinance would adopt all the definitions in the statute, so the definitions of wheeled all-terrain vehicles, public roadways, etc. Can you scroll down a little, Ron, please? So this 1 and 2 up here, that's the real meat of this. Person can operate it on a segment of state highway within the unincorporated county or any other public roadway, as long as the speed limit is 35 miles per hour or less. The next reiterates that anyone doing this has to meet all the requirements, license, registration, permit, anything else that the statute says. They have to carry proof of insurance. They have to obey all traffic laws, including all speed limits. And if they violate that, then they're subject to the infraction penalties as provided by the statute. So that's the end of my presentation. Anyone have any additional questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Matt. So I guess too, for clarification, this just then allows people to actually use it legally on county roads that are 35 miles and under.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And they do have that extra requirements of going in and having all those additional features inspected as well. So we feel pretty comfortable.
And the bottom line is, if someone has a vehicle that they think is eligible, they take it to the DOL. And if the DOL says, no, it's not, then they really fight it out with the DOL. It's not the county that's specifically doing all this.
Okay, we're just giving the opportunity.
This is just allowing them to drive on public roads within the county.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask Matt on one of the things where you said if a driver or rider, I guess, is under 16, they have to have an adult with them. Is that an adult on the same vehicle or just on another one that's next to it, behind them?
I believe it's on the same vehicle. I think what the statute says is under the direct supervision. So I'd have to dig into what direct supervision means, whether that's like on another four-wheeler right next to them or on them. But I think it's basically like someone operating a motorcycle or whatever that requirements, or even like someone with a learner's permit, basically in a car, they have to have someone with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so then this will be on our notice for a public hearing, that we'll have to have a public hearing, you said the first Monday or the last Monday of November?
Yes, the notice is on your agenda for tomorrow. It's my recommendation that ordinances have a public hearing. That's not specifically required by the statute, but I think it's the best practice, and there's really no reason not to do one here. So the notice will be on your agenda tomorrow, and then the public hearing itself will be on November 29th.
Okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
The last Tuesday, sorry, of the month. Okay.
All right, so we have a site agreement with Spokane Transit Authority for some new bus stops going on county-owned portion of property. It's actually old rail property, so I'll have Monty just give a little bit of background on this.
Sure. Can you go to the next slide, Ron, please? So STA approached us about putting 2 bus stops on our property. This is the old Milwaukee. This is Appleway Avenue, just east of Barker. It is inside the city of Spokane Valley. Our property is directly adjacent to the road. In fact, there's a sidewalk on our property currently. And so they'd like a site agreement to build bus stops to change their service in this area. And we're putting together the agreement and would be bringing it to you for your consideration on a consent item on the 29th. Do you have any questions?
So is that within the city of Liberty Lake?
City of Spokane Valley. It's right before you get to Liberty Lake. It's between Barker and Liberty Lake.
How does that affect our license agreement for if they've got sidewalk already there, is there any trail there?
I'm not sure. I know the sidewalk's there. I don't know if we have an agreement for it. Obviously, it's a transportation purpose, which is kind of why we have the railroad there. This was just specific for STA to add some bus stops in the same stretch.
I guess I just want to make sure that we check if there's a license agreement already, because a lot of those
Okay.
that.
I don't want to conflict with an existing agreement.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure that doesn't happen. Great. I know that we have an agreement for the Valley Trail through that Old Milwaukee, and I don't know what's developed in this particular area. But if this, like I said, there's a sidewalk and the bus stops kind of fit in with that. They sort of rebuild the sidewalk, put in ADA ramps, things like that at these 2 locations. But want to make sure it's not in conflict with the existing agreement. Is that your main concern?
That would be my main concern.
Okay.
Because actually right at Barker and Appleway, they just put in that new Starbucks, and there's all kinds of different ins and outs, having just been there recently.
Okay.
That I just want to make sure, and I know with the Valley and their Appleway Trail, that they've been, they have a license agreement, so I just want to make sure we're not, doing anything to that would be in conflict with that.
Oh, absolutely. So we'll reach out to the Valley and make sure that they're okay with it. If there is any kind of difficulties with what they're proposing, we'll come back and brief you on that.
Okay, great. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure that we don't have any issues with anyone else. And
no, that makes perfect sense. We can do that.
yes, I wasn't quite sure. So yes, so that's all City of Spokane Valley at that point then. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Josh, any comments?
Just as I'm looking real quickly at the Appleway Trail on the Valley's website, it does not come out this far. It goes to
Right, I know it's not developed at that point, but I don't know if we have
The
a
plan.
license agreement that extends to their city limit or not, so that's why I just wanted to double check.
read on that. Okay, now the fun stuff. So it's not gonna snow this winter, we talked to the forecasters. It's just gonna be smooth roads all day long, so nice time to hop into this. Andy Shanks here with me, to our remaining supervisor, to talk us through some of the plan we have developed for this winter. And obviously we're, by all accounts, going to have a La Nina this winter, and expecting several snow events, and it's going to start early, as we are finding out today and last Friday. But fortunately that came with some warmth and some rain, so we didn't have nearly the impact that we have out there today. So Andy, I'll let you jump right in.
So again, as Kyle said, it is La Nina this year, which is like the third time in history that they've had the 3 years in a row. So they really don't know, the forecasters I've talked to, they really don't know what we're up against. Usually they're a little wetter and colder than normal, but for us, colder is in a degree or two means either snow or rain. So like Kyle said, Friday it warmed up, and that was a great snowstorm for us. You know, snow in the morning, we're out there, took care of the roads, and really by noon, most of the roads were cleared off. This snowstorm that we got last night and today, it looks like we're gonna go into colder temperatures. And the bad thing is it came in as a heavy wet snow, so it's packed down. I think everybody probably experienced some compact snow and ice on the way in, whether you're in the county, city, or wherever. And we're gonna do our best to get it cleared off before it gets really cold, but that's kind of where we're at.
And just for a small example, you know, every storm's a little different. It's different counties or different parts of the county different. But even just the timing, like, so for instance, in an event like this where we got rain that turned into snow, it actually precludes a lot of our preventative de-icing applications, because the rain washes it all away before it turns to snow. So we don't have, that's a tool in our tool belt that kind of gets taken away from us in an event specific to this one.
And just so you know, we did try up north because it looked like the temperatures were going to be colder. We did try to prevent anti-ice. And again, I wasn't up at 3 when the snow started, so I don't know if it was actually rain first or snow, but each district watches their weather reports and tries to use the best that they can for the storm that's coming. So the next thing here, and we got an awesome picture of some boots and stuff like that. So we've asked to help out the residential streets with the boots. To keep the berms out of the driveways. And we really struggled with this, because if we go out and buy a snow gate that's manufactured, they're coming in around $11,000, $12,000 a piece, and then we have to mount them on and modify them. And 2 guys I want to call out in our shop, Marv Davis and Brian Nacarado, put their heads together and designed our own boot, which you can see these here are muddy because we actually can use them for gravel roads too, to keep the gravel out of the ditches and help them blade. But they built 26 of them this summer and fall. Got 24 of them mounted up. We saved 2 for damage or whatever, and they all are on the same mount. So if one breaks down or something, or a grader breaks down, they can easily swap them from one to the other. They actually worked and designed them so they don't have to take off the wing, which we use a lot in the wintertime for plowing snow. So they did a great job. And again, we saved about somewhere between $240,000 and $250,000 with these guys doing it.
That's amazing.
And they're still working out a few little bugs. The operators are learning to use them and stuff, but this will allow us to. We were reluctant to go into the neighborhoods because by the time we got in the neighborhoods, it's heavy, wet, compact snow, and we would make half the people super mad and the other half were happy to see us. I think this here will make it easier on the citizens. We can lessen, I'm not going to say zero berm, but we can lessen the berm that's in their driveway.
It's just one of the coolest things that happened in Public Works this past year. I mean, with the aftermarket boots that we could buy at 3, 4, 5x the cost, are not nearly the quality of these. They're the right length. Some of them, if they're too long, we can't actually effectively hold that berm when we go to do it. Or they affect the driving wheels on the front of the graders. These are it was just a wonderful design and implementation effort by the team, even all the way down to the hydraulic quick coupling and connections, super fast. They really thought through this installation and application, and it's pretty impressive. They really, kind of funny. The government beat the market for once.
Yeah. and again, I can't say enough about these 2. I went over to the shop. They had cardboard cutouts, and they were fitting it in, and putting limiters on it so that the operators don't, try to lessen the damage, because these graders have lots of movement on that mow board, and trying to keep it in the right spot without damaging this piece of equipment. And again, our drivers, they just got them here the last month to start using them. So it's going to be a new tool for them, but I think everybody so far is excited to have it.
Those two will have to patent it. So that way.
We talked
don't
a
need them
little bit
retiring.
about that, but we want them to stick around.
Well, you need to make sure when you have the snow
Media briefing.
media briefing, yes.
Yes.
That you have those two gentlemen there to.
Well, I've talked to them. They don't really want to be around. They
want-
yeah, I said.
I think a
Martha,
welder might break if we tell them they have to go in front of a camera. We may have a manufactured emergency.
I said Martha Lou was gonna do an article, and they both kind of started shaking a little bit, so, we'll see what we can do.
Okay. Very good.
But yeah, I can't say enough about them, and just to kind of run through, we've got 32 graders, and again, 26 of them will have boots. We have 34 dump truck plows, we have 4 de-icers, 9 loaders, 4 backhoes, and we have a snow blower that attaches to a loader at our arsenal. So we again try to make sure that we marry everything up with the store that we have.
And how's the workforce for those?
That was in the slide down
We're getting
for
there.
challenges.
Okay. I can
Broke
wait.
you a bit.
So, yeah, just some more, again, the boots, and you see that the one on the right's muddy because, again, good way for them to test them was actually out on the gravel roads, and it does help us keep gravel and stuff out of the ditches as they're grading the roads. So next slide, Ron. So here's some stuff that we've done to be prepared for this year. We always get our material ordered: sand, snow, or sand, not snow, sand, salt, our de-icer. We've got contractors for, we had for years, but we re-upped that contract, sent it out, called a lot of different contractors. This is our on-call graders. And usually those are the storms around that 8 to 10, but this year we'll probably pull them up earlier, 5-ish inches. It depends on, again, what the weather all looks like. We've adjusted the district boundaries for the winter time to match our personnel resources. And then with those district boundaries, we'll have a meeting here in the next week or two with the 911 sheriff call out so that they know where the boundaries are, so they can get the issues directly to the supervisors to handle it. And then we've asked for volunteers to help us with snow plowing. And we've worked with Parks, our wastewater group, our signs and signal group to get more volunteers that don't normally do this on a normal day-to-day basis, but they're willing to come out and help us. We change hours. So usually we ran 3 shifts, and this year we're running those 3 shifts. The big change is the day shift. We're starting them at 6 a.m. versus 7:30. Trying to get out ahead of our customers. And then we added a weekend shift, which is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday shift, 6 a.m. to 4. And it's just a couple guys, but that way when we get the sheriff calls or whatever, we're not then calling somebody and waiting for them to get in. They'll be there for the minor sanding, slick spots. And again, if we get a snowstorm like this, then we start calling in the rest of the personnel. And we've got a plan again to get in the neighborhood sooner. And we've also, each residential area, we've created a map for those and numbered them. And that way, if we send it out to a contractor, we just hand them that map with this number and say, here's your area, go plow it. And then we can also get that on the website so the citizens know which neighborhoods we're working in. And each district has their own numbered residential areas. So here's the challenges. You talked about the work shortage. Right now, out of, we should be fully staffed at 86, we've got 72. Which doesn't sound too bad, but the next, what I'm gonna talk about really scares me. A third of that staff has less than 1 year of experience. Half of the staff has less than 5 years. And again, we can do all the practice and training we want, but until they're actually out there plowing and the snow is blowing and drifting and you can't see the curbs and all that stuff, that's where you really learn. And so again, we've got a lot of people, they've maybe only gone through a couple snowstorms in the past. And then, half of our staff has greater than the 5 years. And again, that 5 to 10 year gap is pretty small. And we've got quite a few people at that retirement age. I mean, I know of a handful that are going to retire sometime during this winter-ish. We're trying to convince them that March would be a great time to retire, but some of them are talking December. So that number is always changing. We hired a new guy, he started last Monday from the airport, so he's got actually some plow experience, but some people are kind of over-the-road truckers and really haven't, and we've had at least 2 that I know that just aren't comfortable with it, and they said this wasn't for them, and they've moved on. You hang a 12-foot plow out on front of a truck that's 10 feet out in front of you, and you tell them to go do this on, a mountain road up towards Mount Spokane or in traffic on Argonne and stuff, and it's not for everybody. So, anything you want to add to that?
It's the gap that we have. I mean, it's amazing. You either have less than 5 experience or you have 25, and there's nothing in the middle. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's the 10 to 15 year experienced person in the middle of their career. We have one of them. There's no person. So it puts us, and we're constantly leaning on our senior staff to help and train and help, bring these guys up. And reality is we're just in the training business right now for a long time until something changes. So we're working through it.
So have you contemplated contracting out for part of the snow removal?
Absolutely. We have, we've expanded. We've had some in the past, but yeah, we touched on that just before you stepped in.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No worries. We have, we're getting additional, we've been proactively reaching out to additional contractors to get onto our on-call. And we're gonna, we're gonna pull that trigger a little sooner this year just to be safe, because one of the lessons that we learned last season was if we wait until we're sure that we have a monster storm coming, then they're already gone.
Everybody else.
And so we're gonna put a little bit of financial risk on the people there, and we're gonna bring them out when we think. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But we're gonna be a little more aggressive in that utilization.
Good.
So not a great slide because this is a big picture, but this is our priority route map that is on our website. And Martha Lou tells me that towards the end of this week, first of next week, we will be like the leading ticker, whatever you want to call it, on our website. Right now it's the elections, But on this, it basically, we have, technically there's 4 priorities, but number 4 is our summer roads that we don't plow. So the first priority, number 1 priorities are your arterials, major arterials. Number 2 are the secondary arterials, and then number 3 are the residentials. And some, I'll use like Northwood as an example. It is a priority 2 route that crisscrosses through Northwood. So it's Columbia Drive, Northwood Drive, and Park Vista, I believe it's called. So it kind of gets in that hilly neighborhood in that second tier after Argonne and Bigelow are done, to provide people within about 4 blocks, they can get something that's plowed and stuff like that. And then we come back and we hit the rest of the residential areas. And those priority 2s are in a lot of our hillside residential areas. We crisscross them just to kind of allow for people to get in and out easier and not do the whole area until we have time.
How does that align with your school bus routes?
Everything is a school bus route, almost. I mean, because I get the school bus companies call me and say, well, we want to be a priority. And it's like, well, yeah, like in the rural areas, everything's a school bus route that we plow. So we can't be everywhere at once. So we just try to work our way through it. And in some cases, a couple priority 2s will get done with priority 1s because they're either the end of the route and it makes sense to catch it, or they have a hill on it. We know school buses get stuck on them. But again, most of our roads, other than the residentials, are school bus routes. So they're in the priority 1s or 2s.
So having kids so you can get your road plowed is not the right motivation?
I will tell you, you're important to us, but we still will get there when we can get there.
Yes, if you have them plow it for you.
Yeah, if they're good hard workers.
So we also have, we don't have a link on it up here, we have our interactive activity map which has, we've actually had a lot of debate about this. It has the GPS tracking, so you can see the actual routes on it. Right now, we have it set on a 72-hour clear out loop, I guess is what I would say. So you get 72 hours of historical tracking where everybody went. It is, you have to set it or completely control that time manually. And so it's our best approximation of what an event is, what we need to show the citizenry during an event. Could we have some rolling storms that, that it's going to be a constant refresh. If you go too much longer than that, it's so much data that the page won't actually load. And if you go too much shorter than that, it doesn't really go. So we've just kind of landed on 72 hours as our rolling. So that's when the data is always refreshed.
And remember, this comes from the GPS unit in the vehicle. So if that unit quits working, whether it's an antenna or, it's an electronic piece of device, if it quits working, it doesn't show that we were there. And we're constantly, the managers are going to try to watch all their equipment, but we're not gonna pull a grader in from plowing in the middle of a snowstorm if the GPS quit working. We'll worry about that once we've handled the event. So, and then other communication.
How will you track third-party contractors and where they're at, what work they're doing?
So we actually work with our construction services and they kind of manage them like a contractor.
Okay.
So let's say, we have 3 contractors working in this area, we'll assign it to one of the inspectors. And
But, I mean, on the webpage so that you can notify.
We
You
don't.
just can't.
So,
Yeah,
so
okay.
on the residential areas, we will manually, we'll work with our GIS people and Martha Lou, and we'll manually highlight these areas and we won't
Okay.
use the GPS tracking.
Okay,
So if we're working out in District 4 in residential area 1, we'll show it working, and then we talk once a day, so basically every evening we will update that.
sure, okay. Thank you.
So, I didn't have, they might have GPS, we just don't know, it's definitely not tied into our system.
No, that's fine.
So,
And
Commissioner Kurtz has a question.
I was just gonna say, last year, I think we also had the interactive map set to 72 hours. And I think it ended up, I think by the end there, because we kept getting the additional dumpings of snow kind of one after another. And so we were having a lot of folks that were going and looking at the map and saying, well, no one came through here. And then we were then having to reach out to Public Works to ask, hey, we missed this. But then they were like, well, no, we were just there 4 days ago. There was just another dumping. That's why it looks like we hadn't been there. And I'm trying to, I think at the end of near the end of the season, we had actually created another map. It was a static map, but we kind of color coded what neighborhoods we were going to get to by the end of the season. Are we thinking of having a color coded map? Maybe, so again, so when folks are saying, when are you going to be in my neighborhood? They'll be able to kind of tell, what day you'll be there or not. I mean, that was pretty helpful. What that color coded map that coincided with a day on when they would be coming through.
yes, well, to answer that question, we'll essentially have 3 maps. We'll have our priority route map, which is a stagnant PDF map. We'll have our snow plow tracking map, which is the live GPS map, 72 hours. And then we'll have a residential map, just like you talked about, Commissioner Kearns, like we developed last year, which will be scheduled, working, or complete. And that's the one that we'll highlight at the end of every day. I think we figured around 4 o'clock would be the best time to highlight that, what we accomplished that day, where we're going the next day.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Another thing is we're working with Martha Lou, and we'll probably do a text message with our managers around 4:35 every morning when there's an event like this. We'll get Martha Lou the information so then she can get it out to the news agencies. And then we'll try again to do that around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to get enough time that our guys actually know what's going on. Most of our crews, our early morning starts at 4 in the morning. So that's why I'm saying between 4 and 5, we can kind of get them dispatched and then give a report. So that's some other things we're doing on communication. We also have the 477-3600 number for anybody that wants to call in a concern, and that gets sent right out to our people, so that's a good number to use. And then there is also on the Public Works webpage, there's a fillable form for a concern. In snow plowing, I really like the phone calls. You know, they can say, hey, our neighborhood shows it was done, but this road was missed, because we will miss roads. We're not perfect, and you get in neighborhoods and there's lots of roads, and sometimes you make too many rights and you miss a left somewhere. So please call those in, and I think that's worked well in the past.
Can you send an email out to the commissioners and our assistants to let us know how you want us to contact?
Okay.
Because we will get people getting directly to us, and so it's gonna be easier for us just to have them go directly than
Yeah,
whatever number you
and
want.
again, is what I think Ron's done good, sending them on to me, and usually, just so people know, when I get something from you guys, I immediately send it on to the district managers. They're the eyes and the ears out on the road, they can check it and then prioritize with everything else that's going on. So, yeah, I'll send out kind of a priority. Okay?
But just that way we know.
Yeah.
You know, we're, so that way it's not, we're not all calling different places
Yeah.
for you. So
We'll do that. Thank you. Anything else on communication?
No, I think we're pretty good. I want to leave a few minutes for questions, and if Commissioner French hasn't seen it, I want to at least throw back to that boot slide really quick, because that is just
That's
such
all right. I waste everybody else's time. I'll circle back with you.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
I'll tell
that's
you that
fine.
story another time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. One question for you. The Weather Bureau came to the airport board and said that they are projecting that we're going to have 4 major snowstorms this season. A major storm for them is 4 to 6 inches, 24-hour period. How many are you planning on for that? Because that requires a major mobilization. I'm just trying to kind of synchronize what your thinking is with what the airport's thinking is, and maybe somewhere in the middle is where the real answer is.
Did you get the dates?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I asked for that, and they said get over it. So,
I guess for us, we don't plan on a number of storms. We plan to be prepared for it to snow. It's like 72 hours that we can accurately feel comfortable about planning. So we're constantly in alert mode, and we will be for months. And we're ready to bring people in. We're ready to bring the contractors in. That's about our window. I mean, I watch long range forecasts like very diligently, and some of them, we can see large storms forming off the Pacific and have a little bit more heads up than that. But we really have to be able to move. And the way our storms hit a county so large is so dynamic. Every shop really has to respond differently. Whether we have big old berms down south and that are completely shutting down roads, whereas sometimes up north 4 inches may not, even 6 inches may not actually be as dramatic.
Right.
How the storm comes in, wet to cold, cold to wet. So we really have to kind of plan to be reactive and plan to like I mentioned this morning, because we got rain before the snow this morning, we weren't really able to do preventative ice measurements because it would just wash into the ditch. But we're prepared. We're expecting more chemical use this year to try to also be ahead of the game. And in this region, 1 to 2 degrees is everything, right? So if we don't know, frankly, on a cost basis how that's going to play for us. We have our expected budget, and we have a reserve available if need be. It might just be one of those winters. I mean, some of the most expensive winters aren't big snow event years. They're years where we're just putting out chemical over and over and over and over and over. We might have what is perceived as a heavy winter, but financially it may not be the end of the world for us, because plowing is actually cheaper than putting a lot of chemical on the ground.
okay, thank you.
And really for us, like Kyle says, we're prepared. We have our sand, we have our salt. Our granular de-icer, we don't have large quantities of that, and we don't have large quantities or storage of the liquid. So what really would hurt us if we had 2 major back-to-back and we couldn't get the product delivery in between. In all the years I've done it, it really, 08, 09 was the big one where the railroad couldn't get their tankers to Spokane, which means that our de-icer quantities went way down. But yeah, it's like 72 hours, that's really enough for us. Once we get into the swing of things, these storms here, would have been nice to have a little more. We were actually hauling rock and grading roads on Monday last week, trying to finish up all of our summer and fall work. And again, we knew it was coming, we just, they aren't always the most accurate. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I do just want to applaud Andy and his team, though. We were all very concerned with the staffing situation. We were quite a bit lower than we even are now, and he pointed out the amount of experience we have in the districts and all those efforts of redistributing roadways from districts that are understaffed to more fully staffed districts, and the on-call contractor list being much more robust and being willing to use it sooner, along with potentially more chemical, which means more money, but we need to get people where they need to go safely, and they really reached out to other departments, picked up a lot of CDL drivers that are going to help us out, primarily in the extreme events, but that's when we really need them. And also that weekend shift to be more responsive, taking a ton of different steps to make sure that we're going to get people where they need to go. So really just want to applaud him and his team.
Thank you.
It's a really big effort this year. We were very concerned, and this will be good.
I think it was literally the first thing I grabbed Andy about on my first day here in September. Like, I'm worried. We're starting now.
Yeah, it was bad talking about snow and ice in July and August. It felt wrong.
Well, thank you, and I would just encourage too, I know I talked to Chad about this, so I haven't talked to you, but we know that there's little pockets here and there between the city of Spokane, Valley that, as things are incorporated, that, the county, pockets are, could be easier for the city of Spokane Valley to get to and vice versa. And so I would just ask you to kind of reach out and see what we can do to make those happen, because otherwise I think we get some of these little pockets of county projects or roads that are, the city is coming and doing theirs, and it's just like one street. I know we had that down in Rockford, that I think it's gotten taken care of.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we try to coordinate with all of them, especially the valley as they pick up more. We get little development pockets in there. And we try to swap with them. In some cases, we were going to do some stuff as we leave our Eden pit for the valley, but it would have kind of been in the middle of their operation, look funny. So they said, no, don't, but we'll still pick up this other stuff for you. Kind of Carnahan now, we'll try to pick up all of Carnahan for them from 8th at the bottom up to the top, just because we're usually there first. So we do a lot of, I guess you call it horse trading with the different agencies to try to make it work and make sure we don't miss somebody. But again, we will. It's just a phone call and we'll get somebody over there,
Like I said, I just encourage it because I know some of the citizens I've gotten calls from, it's those little pockets that get missed. And so the more that we can, coordinate with the valley or the city of Spokane.
And there's one just so, it's Jefferson Road and it takes us 13 miles in Idaho to get to it. And so trying to figure out how I can unload that off to either the highway district or somebody in Idaho. But yeah, when I first learned about that, it's like, you're kidding me, but you got to go over Blanchard, go up Highway 57 or whatever, and then come back into it.
Highway 41.
Oh, 41, yes, 41. So yes, it's stuff like that. We're trying to, make contacts and figure out what we can do to help them if they can help us.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
yep, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. I appreciate it.
And we pray for no snow down here, just in the mountains.
Exactly. Helps the budget. Okay.
Would you like to keep going with Ben, or did you want to jump back to?
I think let's go with Mike Burgess. Ben, if you're okay, delaying. We delayed Mike Burgess this morning so Commissioner French could be here. And so if you don't mind waiting them like 15 more minutes.
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize for the delay. I just had overlap of meetings.
Oh, no, that's all, okay. We just, Mr. Burgess just thought it would be better rather than repeat everything if we all just did together. So Mike, you're back on.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Commissioner French. Nice to see you.
Nice to be seen.
So couple documents in front of you, a draft of an agenda that I've put together based on conversations I've had with you. And then there's a second one that is it's Wasac's agenda. So I'll refer to that in a minute. But just I'll run through these. I'll pause after each one if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going just to push through it. This is going to look very familiar to you. This is the similar statement that we've always had at the beginning, and then again with the county fiscal health. I'll probably make maybe a few adjustments to this for a final draft for your approval in a couple of weeks. I'll work with Jeff on that. But just an overriding point about county fiscal health and the state's fiscal condition. In the past, I've been saying to you probably for the last 10 years that, the state's got a ton of money. I'm not super concerned about cuts to state shared revenues. I think that's changing for obvious reasons. I think you all are familiar, of course, with economic conditions in the United States, things like that, inflation, whatnot. But one of the other indicators, a local one, somewhat local, not maybe necessarily local to you, but a lot of anecdotal information, news articles about tax revenues for King County and the city of Seattle really slowing. I think the city of Seattle actually delayed their budgeting process because their revenues were down. Not that that's your issue, of course, but King County and Seattle are normally a lead indicator for the rest of the state. So that's a long way of me saying that hard times might be coming in terms of the budgeting process in Olympia. And that always means cuts. So we're going to need to be more vigilant and aware of this issue than we have been in the past. On the next one there, the Blake decision, you're familiar with that. That is the narrative from last session. I need to get the clean version of what the ask is as a group, when I say group, for local governments and counties this year, but think it's important to leave that as a placeholder for some sort of a narrative there to have on your agenda to communicate with your delegation members when we do that and with other legislators. The third there, Growth Management Act, we always leave a placeholder there for legislation that will impact the county. The climate change issue is still out there. I listed a couple there at the bottom, the condo redevelopment regulations. That's one that we've talked about in the past. And that riparian issue, you might remember we talked about that early last session. It was a very broad sweeping bill on salmon recovery, and there was going to be a lot of impact to the county in terms of setbacks from river development, extra rivers, things and waterways, things like that. And there was some real potential for county cost problems there, increases costs to you. That bill died. It did not make it out of committee. And frankly, because there wasn't very much stakeholder work done with from the governor's office outreaching to impacted parties. But there has been a work group this summer. There will be legislation this year that I don't think will be as, how do I say, it won't be in as bad of a place to start with, maybe with the stakeholders, because there has been input. But we're definitely going to want to watch that for cost impacts and things like that. Do you have any questions on those three? Or I just keep going? Okay, gonna keep going.
Commissioner French.
Oh,
wait a minute.
sorry.
So, the two things, one, well, actually three things, and I don't know the third one falls under this or a separate issue, but there needs to be greater clarity with regard to UGA swaps. And so I know that the city of Cheney and city of Medical Lake are going to be pushing for a specific fix, and evidently Commerce is supportive of the fix.
Okay.
So I can get you language on specifically what they're going to be looking for.
Okay.
Then Scott Chesney is going to be looking for some clarity in the capital funds definition of how you satisfy the capital with regard to growth management. So
Okay.
I would reach out to him and he can give you language on that. And then the state Supreme Court, Friday before last, ruled that construction warranties of anything less than 6 years are not enforceable. And so it needs greater clarity from the legislature to allow that construction warranties it falls under the statute of limitations provisions, and that construction contracts, statute of limitations is only 12 months instead of 6 years.
Commissioner French, that last item, so I know who to reach out to. My colleague from Cheney Medical Lake on that legislation, I'll do that. And then can message Scott to get clarity on that item. The last one, the Supreme Court decision, I'm assuming that that's something that the realtors or home builders will want.
I would imagine the home builders and the AGC and BIAW are going to be the three that are going to be most energized about that one.
So they'll want to pass a bill to fix it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supreme Court, in the absence of clarity, the state legislature, Supreme Court ruled that the 6-year statute of limitations applies to new construction as well, and as opposed to the traditional 12 months. So there's going to need to be greater clarity around that, which means the legislature is just going to have to provide another category.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I can add those things to the draft for your final approval. Next then on the list was natural gas prohibition legislation. This has been a topic that's been around a couple of years. Commissioner French in particular, you're familiar with this and what's going on at the Building Code Council level. So we'll want to pay attention to those things. The next item there, the public building energy standards. That I've talked to some members of your staff about this and their interest in seeking some sort of relief from the law that was passed, that House Bill 1257, that was passed 4 or 6 years ago, maybe longer. Interestingly enough, the prime sponsor of that legislation was Representative Dolio. She had left the legislature, but she's on the ballot tomorrow, almost assured to be returned to Olympia. And I'd like to talk with her about her thoughts on this, and the concept being a couple of the ideas there were, so you probably know you're having to update your buildings based on this law, and it's going to be pretty darn costly. The idea would be a couple ideas is one, to suspend the law. I don't think that's very realistic, or to rescind it, just given our legislature. The second would be direct financial contributions from the state. The capital budget is going to be pinched. We'll talk about that a little bit. So I don't know that there's going to be an availability of funds for that. So the last one, I think, is probably the most realistic politically, would be to ask for a delay in implementation if the county shows, I think I put good faith effort there on my narrative. I could change that. But if the county was like on a glide path to get this figured out, but there's cost barriers to it. And I understand your building is obviously unique and challenging given the age of it and a lot of those problems. So your staff had walked me through how costly it would be. And I think it's a pretty reasonable request, but have a place to start there in terms of a legislator to speak with. And then the last one there, vehicular pursuit. We talked about that legislation a bit last year. I know that your sheriff would be supportive of fixing what the legislature did a couple years ago. So that's 3 more there before we get to the Wasac one. So any questions on those 3?
So with regard to the public buildings, the Western Washington University is under the same heating system that we are in terms of they use steam heat to be able to heat the campus. They did a study last year to see what it would cost to do a conversion. It was $600 million to convert. And so the Western Washington University said, gulp, we need to rethink this. They didn't think it was going to be nearly that expensive. And of course, that's going to be a state expense and stuff. So you've got existing studies that were done by third parties that show that this is going to be a major expense to the state. And if the state gets relief, the county should get relief from it. So just, I guess, make sure that they don't disproportionately burden the counties without carrying the load at the state level as well.
That's a good point, Commissioner, about the college campuses. I hadn't thought about that link. I'll reach out to my colleagues that work in that for the colleges and see what they're hearing or what they're doing, and if they wouldn't have an interest in this issue as well.
Okay.
The next item there, and it kind of goes on to the second page. These are 4 items. So if Ron, you're controlling the screen, maybe go to the WASAC agenda, the second page. So, or the other attachment I gave you. There's 4, WASAC has kind of streamlined their process a little bit this year, and they went to kind of 4 guiding principles. I think or not principles, but 4 issues they're going to be working. I know that you're familiar with those, Commissioner, some of you with your participation with WASAC. I listed them on your agenda. Didn't know that if there were a couple or any of them, I would imagine for sure number 4, you'd have a specific interest in, and probably 3 based on my history with you with the county. I don't know that you'd have as big of an interest on the second one, the extension of the sales and use tax for public facilities in rural counties. Thought maybe you might because of your neighboring counties. Maybe there is a benefit to Spokane County if your neighboring more rural counties get that tax credit. And then I'm kind of going backwards, but the first one there, the Federal Transportation Fund Exchange Program, as I understand it's a way to expedite federal funds coming to you and relieve you of some of the administrative burden that you have to go through when you're using federal dollars, is the way that one was presented to me. But if you want to leave all 4, we can do that, and I'll use, and voice your support for that. These 4, or if you want to remove some, just kind of throw that out there for your dialogue.
Mike, do you see this as just a supplemental sheet that would be given to legislators with our agenda?
Yes, and then Commissioner Kearns, as these bills were making their way through the process, sign in and support, talk to legislators in support of WASAC's efforts on these. That's a pretty common thing that we've done in the past. We've supported WASAC's broader efforts. I mean, I think generally speaking, I try to, focus specifically on your specific items rather than counties broadly. But I think in particular here, the jail cost one might be something. I mean, all of these are probably good without a doubt, but maybe the jail cost one is the largest benefit, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, the 2 that are priorities for me are 1 and 4. 1 we talked about at CRAB. If you get any kind of assistance from the feds, you've got to comply with the whole array of federal regulations that has a dramatic impact on cost and roads projects and stuff. So that I think is a priority that you're going to see from a lot of counties across the state. And then 4 is just it's a problem that all of us are going to be facing. So those are the 2 that I would have the greatest amount of interest in.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think 3 though is still a problem that the state, once they changed everything, they still have not figured out how to ensure that people are getting the care that they need. So.
Okay, so then, I'm hearing support to having the 3. Do we want to not include the extension of the sales and use tax for the public facilities, or what do you think there with that last one? Or I guess it's number 2.
But it's definitely going to be a priority for WASAC.
It is.
So I mean, I don't have a problem attaching this to our agenda, and just as we talk to legislators, let them know our priorities.
That makes sense. Commissioner Kearns and French, you okay with that?
Yeah,
that line of reasoning?
I think that's the way to do it. On ours, it says, we support the WASAC priorities, and then just have this one sheeter be the final page of the packet that you're giving to legislators, or have it attached with our agenda, if you're emailing it to them. And so, yeah, it's like, yes, we also support these, but you can verbally tell them the ones that are most impactful to Spokane County are 1 and 4.
Yeah.
But
I haven't included this Wasatch in the past because it was always more lengthy, and I think this is a more streamlined way that they've done this, which I think makes good sense. So that's why I brought it forward, but that makes good sense, Commissioner, to do it that way. So it sounds like I'm hearing we'll leave that in that way and explain it in that manner.
So on two, you're probably gonna see some energy on two from GSI to try and expand the program to include Spokane County as one of those counties eligible for the funding. The last time they tried to float this, there was hardly any interest at all in supporting that. And in fact, I think the whole program was on the fence in terms of whether it was gonna continue or not. So, but just know that there's probably gonna be some energy about trying to include Spokane. That's probably gonna come from GSI.
Yes,
Yeah,
Commissioner, over the years, there's been efforts by other counties. I know Clark has had an interest in it because of the border county. That's their argument, is this the tax loss, the flight down to Oregon. So good point. Yes, I would imagine efforts to expand that for sure.
Yeah, they try to expand it. It's not just that they don't want it just rural. They want it rural and border.
Right.
To lump us in. But yeah, Commissioner French is spot on. There was
Yep.
very little support for it.
Um,
I'm sure the push will be there.
Going back to the other page, sorry to make it jump around. Looking at capital budget requests, there's two there that I'm familiar with that I've talked to you individually, most of you individually, about the minor league baseball issue that I know you're aware of. And then additionally, the Spokane Fairgrounds roof replacement. I should have put the dollar amount there. Well, I don't have a narrative for either, but you're familiar with those projects. So clearly I would fill in a narrative before we broadcast this publicly. I don't know what your thoughts are. Is there a capital budget project that I'm missing that I need to add to this list? There's, normally too, what we've done is we've had specific county requests. And then if there are other regional ones, we've added those at the, towards the end of our list, if that makes sense. So we've certainly prioritized your direct county asks.
We had discussed last time about maybe adding on capital requests for the health district.
Okay.
So the ones that did not get funded through ARP. And Jeff, you'd probably be the best one to know what of their asks are capital that did not get funded. Could you refresh our memory on that?
I know
ARP,
part of it was the clean energy standards requirements for the buildings. So
Oh, so looping that issue back to capital request.
ARP funded 1.39 million. The additional request is just over 7.5 million. And that's the energy audit as well as some, what's the acronym for disability usage?
The ADA.
There we go, ADA, I'm sorry.
Is that though, so that's 7.5 million for just the health district's building?
Per their request, yes.
But then you're just running through this in my head, but then the other county buildings would be similar in how much they need to comply with the energy, the clean energy, correct?
So,
They'd have to be.
yes, so we should add that just because I think it would give a number to help on why we need the state to help with the clean energy standards.
Okay, from a strategy standpoint, I'd probably like to lump them all together and use that as evidence in our the ask on that clean energy issue and the ask for a delay, I guess is the way to say that.
What we did with what the board submitted to GSI for their request didn't include the full 7.5 million. It was 3.75 million, kind of a phase 2 versus asking for
Okay.
the whole.
So how about I do this then, Jeff? You and I talk soon and get that kind of narrative fixed up to add. Does that sound fair, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so that's an ad there. Are there any other ads? And then what about the other two items that are there that I had listed, that I'd heard of?
Mr. French?
So we could probably get rid of the BNSF bridge, because we got that funded through BNSF.
Oh,
Is that
sorry,
fair?
Commissioner, I'm still focused on the capital budget as opposed to the and I'll transition to transportation here in a minute.
Oh, okay. Well, then where would funding come from for Fairchild Air Force Base and acquiring mobile home parks? That'd be in the
So-
capital budget, or is that a separate line item?
There was an insertion last year of capital budget funds, and you're sharp to remember that. That wasn't something that we had specifically asked for. It was, some of your local delegation asked for that, but yes, that's generally capital budget. So we'd like continued funds there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we got a deal in the process now, and there'll probably be another one. I'd probably put 7.5 million on it. And, because they won't fully fund it, they'll probably only fund 5, but
Yeah,
we'd start at 7.5 and then, see how much we can get.
okay. And then I can talk to Aaron and get the specifics on the fairgrounds roof replacement, right? It'd be Aaron to talk to about that, correct?
Yes, it sounds like, I just got a thing saying that the county would provide 3 million and the state request is for 1.4.
Yeah, I think that's the number I saw.
Exactly the number you saw.
Okay. All right,
And then, do you want me to talk about the rest of this list?
Well, that's just FYI if you want to.
Because then it was talking about the health district, but you guys will talk about that for the clean energy standards. And then I don't remember this Shrek new building. So,
Yeah, they briefed us on that when they did the
Yeah.
presentation.
okay,
$25 million. They have 10 million in reserve now, so they need another 15.
And what was put on the GSI request is to the state of $3 million. That's a regional emergency communication systems
Sure.
facility.
but E911 specific or just in general?
911 dispatch, yeah, all that.
And I've not seen the GSI updated version to know what is in or not.
Okay. Okay, we can add that one as well. All right, and then shifting to transportation. This is the old list, commissioners, that I just left it all from last year. You know, you're well aware that a transportation revenue package did pass last session. You know, simply put, probably removing the likelihood of anything passing this year. So just kind of setting the table there. You're correct on any list would remove the BNSF bridge project, Commissioner French. But don't know, you know, are there things that we do want to add so they're out there in the discourse if for some reason there is an opportunity for funding, or do we want to leave the two there, or how do we want to, what do we think?
go ahead.
So I would put on the list interchange modification for 904 Medical Lake, Four Lakes, Craig Road interchange. That's a low lift. That's not a very big dollar amount. Probably less than.
Commissioner, you said 904 modification, but before that you said something that I didn't catch.
Interchange
Interchange. Okay, sorry.
modification. Basically, we've got to change the westbound access route on that so it better serves Craig Road and industrial development over there.
Okay, that sounds good. Do we have, who can I talk to at the county to get some help there on the narrative and the cost and whatnot?
Matt Zeracor would be the best contact for that.
Okay,
And he's in the room right now, so.
Matt, if you could email me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Okay. So my next steps then would be to take this and work with Jeff to get it really cleaned up and get it to a form where we'd ultimately probably turn it into a letter that we sent out. But like I said, we would Get it to your approval for over the next couple, 3 weeks, and then in hopes of meeting with your delegation members, in mid-December, maybe even the first week of January if it gets pushed off that way, and present it to the delegation at that time. And I can work with Gina, Jeff, to find a couple dates for Zooms that we would just throw out to the delegation, and they'd come in as almost like an open house type setting. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. So I've got what I need for next steps. Is there anything I was missing or things that you'd like to add on? And maybe those things will come up. I know that your auditor is there. Nikki, nice to see you. Good luck tomorrow. I guess good luck to all of you tomorrow, getting through it. Do you have some specifics, Vicky, probably?
Certainly, if the board will indulge.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the auditors this year have 2 priority bills. The first is the one that we ran last year, which is consistency and standards for voter pamphlets. Because right now, there are inconsistencies between the standards for the state voters pamphlet that's produced by the Secretary of State's office and the local voters pamphlets that are produced by the county auditors. And it specifically involves what can and cannot be in a candidate statement. So we very much want to align that. And the bill would also require that appointed writers of the for and against statements must reside in the jurisdiction of that measure. So that's our first priority. Our second priority is addressing harassment of election officials. We were fortunate to have a bill passed last session that makes cyber harassment a Class C felony. And we are looking towards having any method of communicating a threat as being a chargeable event. We're still discussing whether that would be a felony or perhaps a gross misdemeanor instead. Those are our 2 priority bills. There are a couple items, if the board wouldn't mind, I just need your ear to be listening while you're there, and that's on ranked choice voting, which we understand may be making another run. And also, just popped out of my head. It's one of those days. Snow has fallen. Any changes to the housing surcharges that are on recorded documents. We just want to make sure that nothing gets introduced that makes it difficult to impossible to collect those fees. Because we've heard rumors that there's talk about increasing them in unusual and interesting ways. And then lastly, to one of the things that Commissioner French mentioned, if we're going back to potentially acquiring mobile home parks, the auditors would love to work with whatever group from WASAC to change the process of transferring titles on mobile homes when it's a bulk buy at a mobile home park, because it literally will take us years to transfer titles on those mobile homes. And that probably is not the timeline anybody would want to deal with, because a lot of times the titles on mobile homes are not current from the person who thinks they currently own the mobile home. So you're looking at a minimum of 3 years. So we'd love to work with the commissioners to streamline a process.
And go ahead, Mike.
Oh, no,
Josh.
it's me. I was just gonna ask, Vicky, has the Auditors Association taken a stance on ranked choice voting?
Our association is split.
So are they not taking a stance, or have they taken a stance?
We have not taken a formal stance because the membership is split in a variety of different factions.
Okay. I'll throw out to Mike. I don't know where my seatmates stand. I am opposed to ranked choice voting, and if a bill comes in, I would request that you sign in against it.
I'll support that.
Yeah, I've been supportive of that as well.
So support of the opposition.
Correct.
Okay.
I actually had a conversation yesterday with a citizen in one of the small communities. He said, I moved up here from California for two reasons. One, to protect my family because the crime rate was through the roof, and to get rid of ranked voting. Unsolicited.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mike, anything else?
No, I think that gives me what I need to move forward, and Jeff, I'll be in touch. We'll get this. I'll make an effort to clean this up, get it to you, and then if you can put your touches on it too, that'd be great.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate you hanging on, and I'm sure we're going to be talking much more frequently going forward.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, commissioners. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Okay, so then that's going to take us to Ben Bradibo. And you have someone with you. I apologize. Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know, this is Chris Davis. He works in our office.
Good morning.
Chris, thank you. Sorry, Chris. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your patience in waiting all morning with us. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to come here today to talk again about the Newman Lake Flood Control Zone District. This is a discussion about the assessment, setting the assessment to collect the budget that will support the district operations for 2023. And so our intent is we have two items that are for the board's agenda tomorrow. One is to set the notice of public hearing for the public hearing that would happen in December. And this is standard annual event to comment on the assessments for their properties that support the district operation. Happy to take any questions on that. But the main topic for discussion today is this discussion about assessed versus market value, use of assessed versus market value. And this came out of the Board of Appraisers work looking at assessing the benefit classes. But as part of that, they made a comment that the county should consider using, or they recommended the county should use market value as opposed to assessed value. And so what we would like is we're requesting a decision on doing that, and Chris is able to describe where we stand in that process a little bit. Just for a refresher, all properties in the county have a market value. The assessed value is then reduced, likely due to a exemption for often around Newman Lake for forest land or agriculture or open space. And so it's currently used the assessed value, which is a lower value, which doesn't change the budget for the district. It just redistributes how that money is collected off of properties. And so, Chris?
I provided a handout to the board. It pretty succinctly goes over the background. I think the board's well aware of the history of this. This issue has been presented, I think, since January. At least we submitted on behalf of the board a question to the AG about whether or not the board could basically switch the benefit ratio from the relative value, i.e. the assessed value, to market value. Unfortunately, we still haven't heard from the Attorney General's office on that in a letter of opinion, and we don't have an estimate or time frame where we'll actually hear from them. However, I wanted to put this together for the board because I guess the crux of the issue is who's paying what. And Mr. Bradibo was able to provide us with the numbers as to a summary of what exactly would happen to these parcels if we change the benefit ratio from the assessed to the market value. And I think, as you can see here, 41 parcels will increase their payment by between $337.49. The average increase will be $87.52. And conversely, 743 of the parcels will receive a decrease in average between $35 at the high end to $4.89. That takes into consideration the tax exemptions. So the assessed value, which is currently in place, addresses the tax exemptions for farmland and timberland, whereas it doesn't take into consideration the senior citizen exemption. Whereas the market value does take into consideration the senior citizen exemption, but it does away with all the other exemptions previously mentioned. So that's the difference. Our recommendation to the board today is that we maintain the status quo, that we implement the assessed value as opposed to the market value. And that is because not only is it supported by the statute, I mean, both positions are supported by statute. The question is whether or not the board can change that or not. And unfortunately, we don't have any precedent to establish that. In terms of whether or not we could revisit this issue when we do hear from the Attorney General's office, we would like to readdress this issue and see whether the board would like to change that benefit ratio or not. But until we get that, that might be something we have to look at in 2023. Are there any questions?
So currently we're using the assessed value.
Correct.
And so it's, since that's what we've already been historically doing to try, that's what we're not sure that we can change it midstream, basically.
Essentially, it sounds like the reading of 8609, the appraisers can do the assessed value or the market value. We have always done the assessed value, at least historically, but we want to know whether or not we are authorized to change that.
Okay. So that's what we're asking the AG's opinion is.
Correct.
So yes, it seems like if we changed it would be a potential lawsuit.
Probably.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So on the agenda for the notice of public hearing, does it state that we'll be using assessed value?
It does at this point, yes.
So either we'd have to strike that or it stays on as presented.
Correct. And I had this conversation with Jim Maceo prior to that.
Any questions or concerns with how it's stated on the agenda for tomorrow, Josh? Okay, Commissioner French?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the information, appreciate you explaining to us for that.
Nice to see you in person.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
I'm working on it.
Don't even worry about it. No emergencies.
That is going to take us to our budget discussion. So I'll let you.
Thank you, Commissioner. First up, we have as you requested, a red line copy of the general fund balance policy briefing that was prepared by Tessa. And it shows the differences between what we currently have and what's being proposed. The main emphasis is on increasing the amount of the minimum committed fund balance from a 10% level to a 16.7% level, which equates to approximately 2 months worth of of rainy day funds or reserves so that we can set that aside. The way in which it would be calculated is set forth as a benchmark of using the subsequent adopted budget. So in this particular case, if the numbers held true for what we initially rolled up back in September, the expenditure budget would be approximately 234 million. And that would then equate to a committed balance of 39.18 million. And that's that's in contrast to what was calculated in our 21 audited financial statement of a little over 23 million. So that represents an increase of about $16 million.
So I had a couple of questions on this. So why would we use the adopted budget when we, in May or June, we would have our financial statements, actuals? And why wouldn't we be using actuals then to base what?
You certainly could, and there's a bunch of different, you could use that. You could use the.
And then I guess the other question is, would it be a rolling 2-month average, you know, on a rolling 12 months, would it be 2 months average? I mean, so it's like, I've got questions on how we're calculating what that
Sure.
2 months is.
I don't know of anyone that would use a rolling average. They would establish it at a set point in time for a year usually for the calculation.
Because what I don't want is to have a percentage in here, because that percentage is gonna change every time. So when we say like approximately 16.7, that's just for this year. So I don't know that I would want that in our ordinance or resolution, because that percentage is gonna change based on how we determine what our 2-month amount is, correct?
Well, it
No,
would actually stay
the percentage always stays the same, because 2 months is the 60, it's the dollar amount that will change.
But we could still specify it as just 2 months versus a percentage.
I guess that's what I'd be more, if we're saying it's 2 months worth, then it's, to me, it's 2 months.
Eliminate the percentage.
Yes, it's not a percentage. We're basing it on 2 months of actual amount.
Certainly.
But that's where it's like, I'd rather have it be based on actual, not based on budgeted, just because, as we know, budgeted amounts and actual amounts differ every year.
Sure. So if we look at the timing of, like you were saying, of when we have the actuals, what would you propose in terms of, we would be looking at the 21 actuals at this point to calculate that figure, or would we be?
Well, we know we know our 21. So yes, so we're always going to be in a delay. But I think, or I don't know, some type. Yeah. Go ahead.
So what would be the challenge in using the projected budget for the next year? I mean, we're gonna know what that is by the end of the year when we adopt the budget. So 2 months of that is the number for moving forward. That way we make sure that we fund that, as opposed to, I don't know, just asking the question. I mean,
Like in the last few years, we've severely underfunded, the budgeted amount has been very different than the actual revenues.
right.
So that's where, and like on expenses, yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem, like, since we didn't have because this is based on expenditures, which now we know our expenditures are under from last year to next year because of the agreements being settled. So I don't know,
But knowing that means that the amount that is reserved next year is gonna be greater than the amount that would have been reserved for 2022 because we had not calculated all the potential expenses. So the budget will contemplate all the potential expenses and have, 2 months of that. So we would have, I guess the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking about maybe tying it to the budget is, this is a budgeted number, so tying it to the budget for next year makes some sense, but otherwise we're gonna be trailing.
Right, but then what you actually put in committed is gonna be a budgeted amount. I'd rather true it up. I budget for it, but I would true it up when we know what the actuals are. Because we also have a lot of amended budget items that come in that increases our expenses during the year. That's what I'm just struggling, as I read through this, I'm struggling with what's the right number, and how do we make sure we're there, so, and I just saw this morning, so I'm struggling with how we get there.
How you get there, yeah. So.
Because I want it to be realistic, not.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to accomplish and stuff. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of the underwriters and saying they are going to be looking to make sure that we have the ability to cover our expenses moving forward. So they're looking at a forward number as opposed to expenses we've already paid for. So if they're looking forward and making sure that we have the reserves to cover that, then it seems to me tying the reserve account to that forward perspective, there's some logic in that correlation between those two expectations. That's what I was trying to get at and stuff.
No, it's
So I'm just trying to think, the reserves are really for more the underwriters than they are anybody else.
And I think that's an important part right there. If the purpose of this is for the bond rating, I would think us having the ordinance or policy, having a policy in place and a dollar amount of, equal to 16.7%, being the 2 months of our adopted budget of the current year, I don't think we're at risk of being downgraded, are we? If we have a policy that shows every year 2 months worth will be set aside, because that's better shape than we're in today, isn't it?
Well, the one observation I'd make, Josh, is that if you're going to tie it to 2 months, then you don't need the percentage. If you're going to go to the percentage, you don't need the 2 months. Because you're using two calculations to get to the same number. And I think what you'll find is the budget 2 months is going to be at or greater than the 16.8%.
No, 2 divided by 12 is 16.7. That's what that percentage is.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That equates to 2 months.
I was wondering where that came from.
Yeah, 2 divided by 12 is 16.7.
Oh, I thought it was just an accounting thing.
No, but still, so I think.
No, it's a math thing.
It's a math thing. Probably that new math.
Yeah.
It's potentially redundant, but it is to Commissioner Kerner's point, it's the same calculation, it just probably doesn't need to be stated twice.
Yeah.
But so if it's a policy in place and a policy that puts us in a better spot than we're in today, I don't see why we wouldn't just go with this. Would we be at risk of being downgraded if we improve the situation that we're in today?
Well,
I would think that's pretty unlikely. Maybe not impossible. We don't know what the future holds with bond markets and the financial world, but I would think we'd at least hold steady, improving our situation like this.
So the bond rating looked at our entire, fund balance. So what, even unrestricted and all of that. So we're already in a better position. We're just saying we're going to commit more to that. So it doesn't change really. I don't see that it changes our bond rating unless we were really spending down our fund balance.
Yeah.
That's the issue, which we have not allowed to happen. Having
So
a
I would-
policy in place is a good thing.
Yeah.
There's just a few things I'm, like, then let's just put the 16.7% and not put approximately, and that is equivalent to 2 months. And I would state it more that way if that's what we're really trying to do. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, though, if we're basing it on adopted budget, once we get to actuals, though, is there a mechanism to adjust? Because that could be our budgeted amount that will true up when we get to, a year end.
So wouldn't you true up when you adopt the budget for the next year?
That's why I think we should just do it with the budget. I don't think there's a point to do it, 6 months, 5 to 6 months later into the next year, just because you'll be doing it the next December.
And if you have a bad year, then you need to make an adjustment. If you have a good year, then you just don't fund as much.
Yeah,
So that going back, that as your budget for the next year. I think I see where you're trying to get to, but I think you true it up at the end of the year.
That's why I just gotta think through it to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that I do that. So,
because it probably doesn't look good if we're in a situation where if revenues do decrease and a general fund, and then we're going and we're pulling funds out to bring that number back down to 16.7, if it ends up above, that's probably something we don't want to explain to the bond underwriters either, why we removed money from it. So just take care of it the next year at December as a part of the budget process.
yeah, I just gotta get it in my head, put it out there that way. Okay, so that was one of the questions I had. The other one is, use of the committed reserves we talk about, but then we say funds in excess of the minimum level noted above may be used for the following purposes. So why are we restricting, so is that restricting our unreserved fund balance?
No, just giving you options and explaining applicable uses for using fund balance. So it does in some ways say that it just delineates, as an example, like at the bottom there, may be used for the following purposes, but it doesn't commit you to that.
I'm not sure that we need that in the policy, because that is how, I don't know.
Less is more.
Yes, we're making it more and more restrictive for fund balance. And those are things that we already look to if we're going to do anything out of fund balance. I mean, we're all trying to balance a budget based on revenues and expenditures, not anticipating using fund balance. So then it's a choice that the commissioners can make as they're budgeting if they choose to take things out of fund balance, but I don't know that I want to continue to restrict it.
So a question, and I'm looking at the bottom of the sheet here. Funds in excess of minimum level noted above. So why would we put funds in excess of the 16.8, whatever the number is? Why would we put it in there to begin with? I mean, why wouldn't we put, if there was excess funds, why wouldn't it go into one of the other reserve accounts as opposed to the restricted account?
Or it just sits in unrestricted.
So Tessa, it looks like you drafted a lot of this language. Is there any clarity maybe that you would provide us to the why behind it?
I think it's just to kind of affirm our current kind of standard operating procedures. We do not spend unassigned fund balance unless we're contemplating these things. And so I think that was the goal, to just kind of take our standard operating procedure and put it into policy. So we do have something to point to. when we say we don't like to use our unassigned fund balance for things other than these.
But then it's also in my mind, it's saying we will be using it for these things, and then sometimes in your unreserved fund balance, you don't want to be touching fund balance at all. So, I mean, that's where I just,
So your maximum flexibility is actually to delete that last part of the policy.
well, it's to delete it, but it's also then just, say, we don't even want to use fund balance for these things. I mean, you can go the opposite direction. And so I just feel like, each board is gonna have to make those tough decisions as they look at the budget. And, no one fiscally responsible is going to want to use operating fund balance. They want to balance the budget on your revenues and your expenditures, not on the back of your fund balance. But if we need to for one-time capital things, then that's a choice that the board has to make, and it has to be discussed and talked about. I don't think it has to be in here. I think that's putting more restrictions. To me, it's a discussion that the commissioners have to make each time they budget. So I would just not put it in here because it is how we operate.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm in support of where you're at, because if this is the minimum fund balance, then that's the minimum. You're not gonna go any lower than that. That's the minimum. If you got more funds, than projected, you're not gonna put it in this restricted, you're gonna put it in one of the other categories. So why even have language that says you're gonna dip into this restricted reserve if the policy is we're not gonna dip into the restricted reserve?
Yeah, I think to me, it's like if that's something we want, it would be a separate resolution to talk about what we think of unrestricted fund balance would, how we would define it. I think it monies it up with your minimum general fund balance in here. Because we're really talking about what is our minimum committed general fund balance is what this resolution to me is saying. And so now we're kind of adding something else into it for the unrestricted that is not really defined. And so if you want a separate unrestricted fund balance policy, then that's a separate policy in my mind, not putting it in with this one.
So am I getting a consensus on two changes thus far? One is the verbiage in that sentence that says no less than 2 months, and instead of approximately, saying equivalent to 16.7%. And then the deletion of the last paragraph that begins funds in excess of the minimum level.
So I would say up above, it's, committed fund balance of 16.7%, which is approximately, which, I don't know. I would say 16.7%, which is, represents 2 months. Because neither one's approximate. We're saying it's either.
Right, so if you eliminate the word approximately and just insert equivalent to.
I think bottom line, we're committing to the 16.7%.
I think approximately is sufficient because it is like 16.7777, like, I mean, so I think approximately is good. I don't think that's misleading or anything like that, but I assume that's why you put approximately rather than 16.777777.
Well, Josh, so wouldn't we just do 16.7% and say, which is approximately 2 months? So that
I think either way works. I don't think the way it's written is confusing. No less than 2 months, and then in parentheses, approximately 16.7%. That to me, that reads normal. That doesn't seem odd to me the way it's on the red line version I've got.
I'm okay with whatever you guys decide you want to do there. The only thing I'm not sure that we've got universal agreement on is the last part of that sentence. It says for the subsequent year, I think you're still at the subsequent year, and I think I'm campaigning for the adopted budget. So I don't know that there's really a whole lot of distance between there, but other than that, I think whatever you guys decide as far as the verbiage on that other thing, I'm fine with.
I think, do you have some GFOAs, I guess, assuming you took this from GFOA, from some of their best practices? So I guess between now and next time we meet, that if we can go through that with me and make sure I've got further clarity to make sure we got that. So this will not be on our agenda immediately. It'll be one more week, so. And then, yeah, so Josh, what are your thoughts on the last 3 bullets?
Yeah, no, I mean, if to give a board the maximum amount of flexibility, I mean, sure.
Well, and I think if we really wanted to restrict it in the for future boards, it should be a separate policy that's really calling out, here's the unrestricted reserves balance, because we're setting this as committed in this policy, or it's a whole nother section that's talking about unrestricted reserves. But I mean, like last time you talked about a rainy day fund for those and, different things. And so I think it's really a whole different discussion as to what you do with unrestricted reserves. We're setting our committed amount for bond purposes.
Yeah.
And the other is then up to the commissioners.
I agree.
So
Sure, we'll follow up with some examples, prime examples from the GFOA, and also what other entities are using for their basis of calculation.
Thank you. Okay.
Next, we have the capital budget follow-up, and Ron, if you want to or do you have that on your screen? Or does Ron have that?
Ron has it, and it is difficult to see on the screen, and it looks like the commissioners present have it printed. Josh, do you have it available on your computer?
I believe it was emailed. Yes, let me check. Yep.
So when we last spoke, we wanted to reconvene and take a look at an updated list that shows the funding options. And Tessa's prepared this spreadsheet that shows the dollar amounts available across the top for each of the categories. And then in gray, the sections in which there wouldn't be applicable uses for each of those capital funding requests. And so I didn't know how you wanted to approach it in terms of which, if you wanted to just go down the list, or if you wanted to start in the middle, or where you wanted to, again, begin our discussions.
So it's helpful knowing what things can and can't come out of different things, but I guess, what are the things, I mean, we've heard from everybody the needs, and I know you had the list, I don't have the list in front of me, you do, Scott. What are the things that your team, your management team is saying are the critical things that have to be done?
So those are filled in on here. That's what we took the liberty of Tess took the liberty of adding. What's in here right now to propose funding is the Fair and Expo HVAC and roof replacement. That's at the bottom of your page 1. The second thing is the funding of the ERP system. That's on the second page, I believe. You'll see 4 million, because we're focusing on 2023. You'll see 4 million of revenue replacement. The other 4 million would be on 2024, just timing of when the implementation would take place, when the contract would likely require payment.
So we should put a project balance of 4 million, because we know that's what you're thinking.
Yep, for 2023. We've also highlighted.
Right, but wouldn't we want to put like 4 million out there so we know that it's?
We would want to, that's an option for the board. Well, I mean, you've already have a resolution that says the priority of revenue replacement is for ERP and facilities. We would, in our 6-year capital plan, we would actually designate the 2024 4 million under revenue replacement for the funding model 2. So that would highlight it. So we've just for condensing this and focusing on 2023, we didn't highlight that part, but yes, we would put that in 2024.
Okay, because we want to make sure it's committed
Yep.
now.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll choose to spend it in other ways. So if that's what that really is, somehow we've got to identify that that's
Agreed.
not available funding.
Yep. So we would earmark that in the 6-year CIP plan as 4 million in 2024. Funding is revenue replacements. Another one is on the back to the first page. It is the facilities, House Bill 1257, investments and other identified facilities needs. We've placed those on here under REIT 1, which is an eligible use of that. That's $2,050,000. Then we've got a number of parks projects which are eligible under REIT 2, and that is on the second page again. Actually, I'll restate that. Most of it is REIT 2. There is one eligibility under REIT 1, which is the paving of the main parking lot of Liberty Lake Regional Park. So those amounts are about just shy of $3 million, about $3.2 million. And that is in a combination of REIT 1 for the 630 of Liberty Lake, and then the rest of it is under REIT 2. And then Tess has included the grant portion of all of those projects under the far right column under grants.
So we would need to commit to those 2 projects in order to get the grant funds.
Correct.
I believe the board has already affirmed some action to that effect.
You have. In order to apply for the grants, the board has adopted a resolution to apply for those grants.
Right, so I guess in my mind, so those are non-negotiable things. We've already committed those 2 items.
Mm-hmm. And then the other piece that's facilities related, we have it under parks right now, is the conservation district building remodel, which is no longer the conservation district. It's now owned by Spokane County, and that's the 916, and that is a REIT 1 eligibility. The other things that we identified, I'll go back to, I think we've covered everything on page 1. So top of page 2, some of our IT requests that our team had come in for our network switch replacements, server replacements, cabling upgrades. We are recommending those also get funded, and that's the ARP indirect revenue category is a place that we've put those, and that's $445,000. I think down at the bottom of that page, Public Works. These are all identified improvements being made to our Public Works facilities. The funding source would be the Roads Fund, Enterprise Fund, and then the Wilbert Vault facility is basically the start of that project, which I think is Kyle can confirm, but it's more design and maybe some initial construction on that.
Yeah, likely some site remediation would be the start of that spend, the big spend being in 2024.
Let's see here. Then on the third page, the vehicle replacement for risk management. That comes out of the liability risk pool, or not the pool, but the liability account. So it gets funded out of there, not directly out of the general fund. And then there is some of the $2 million that the county received for legislative criminal justice funds, there's 946,000 remaining. We just applied the top priority items that the sheriff's department had identified through their capital fund to exhaust the 946. The other piece we put in here.
Scott,
Yeah.
Apologize to cut in, and those funds did have an expiration date on when they had to be spent by, correct? And
I don't believe so, Commissioner.
Oh,
I
they
believe
don't?
Those were
Okay.
given to the county, and it was at your discretion on how to spend them within what the defined uses of them were, but it was very
Okay.
broad.
Okay, I apologize. For some reason, I thought those had like a 2 or 3 year date that we had to have them expended by, but okay, my mistake.
And then for consideration, we've had a lot of conversations with Superior Court and additional needs. One of the learnings that we had in our last meeting was they didn't necessarily, I'll do my best to try to articulate what I think I heard from them, is the 13th courtroom wasn't imminently needed for 23, but they were looking for additional courtroom space that would allow their ability for handling first appearances, to relieve some of the burden off an existing courtroom that is more trial ready. And if we could get another courtroom space identified for a smaller courtroom, they would be able to start utilizing that trial court space, which is having to share as a hybrid model today. So this is just an estimate to do some facility improvement in a space in the courthouse where it would provide a smaller courtroom facility for maybe one of their commissioners to be able to have non-jury trials. That sound about right, Mike? Yep. And it could be 250, it could be 500. We just kind of went on the high side right now. Courtrooms are not cheap, so rather opted for the high side. So that was really where, as our team went through the list, looked at it, said where the recommendations were. I think there is, so it still shows capacity in some of our funds, which gives some ability for the commissioners to kind of look at that and see where you might also want to direct some investments to. I would say the scraps overflow is probably a good place to look for funding. That's the pole barn concepts, which Kat has highlighted as our ability to move parts of our space that's utilized for cats and dogs out to rotate them as some deep cleaning needs to take place, and then rotate them back in, that sort of stuff. So that's probably a good use of a REIT 1, or as you can see here, indirects or investment income. On the jail service or detention services, a lot of requests in there. My suspicion is that there's ability to absorb that within some of their operations budget. Perhaps not the jail module remodels, which the team highlighted as one of their larger cost items. So that's probably one I'd also flag for the commissioner's consideration. Back on second page, there's a few things on juvenile. Those are in the prioritized order as well, that could be utilized for REIT 1 capacity. And then it really drops down to anything remaining on the sheriff's department.
Question for you, Scott.
Please, sir.
And this is probably more for you, Mike. As we talked about the space for the 13th Superior Court judge and maybe an interim space, since that intake and release building is not being used for anything else, what would it take just to convert that into a short-term courtroom and put a judge in there, and you got access to parking and stuff, and so if they're not doing jury trials or anything like that, is that a reasonable use of that? Or you've seen it, I haven't been inside it, so I don't know.
I'd have to look at it and do some research on it. It's kind of small, but maybe a civil use.
What about security? Do we have, the
No, that's
screening
why I'm
station
saying,
and?
out of custody security, or out of custody is what I'd say, like civil cases or something.
But and maybe what I heard from the Superior Court judge was not, maybe I think I heard something else. I did not think that they were actually adjudicating folks that were incarcerated, but they were dealing with other civil cases that were coming before the court. And so they were using this judge as a relief valve more than they were jury trials and things like that for people that were incarcerated. So maybe I heard wrong, and that's possible, but I was thinking about those other kind of cases that could just get it off their docket.
Yeah, out of custody cases.
Yeah, out of custody
And,
cases.
yeah, I could explore that more for you, and just even asking down the road.
Would we still need a metal detector and all of that? Because that's what, when I think of security, that's where my brain went, was do we need the scan stations and that?
And this might not be a good idea at all. I'm just trying to figure out, we got that building,
Yeah.
how can we use it, and kind of a deal. I mean, otherwise, if we can't use it for the court, could we put the library over there? And then recapture the library space and turn that into a courtroom on a short-term basis.
Yeah.
I mean, we invested a lot of
There's a lot
money
of
in the
options.
space for the library, maybe we can recapture some of that.
It also, Commissioner, might be able to be a good use as we do some transitions and some moving and shuffling of teams around. That could be a place that you put some interim basis while you're remodeling a spot and then move them back, and another team in there, move them back.
Yeah,
So that could be a good use of it as well.
transition space, yeah.
What our team talked about this, what we're trying to do is not have to replicate the security measures in another location because of the cost of the security guards, metal detectors, the x-ray, all that sort of stuff. So we're trying to be thoughtful from that approach, but I do think there is some uses of it, either on a temporary basis for a team to go to or others as we're moving the puzzle pieces around.
Well, and if they get to the lot of library space, they've already been through, the metal detector and all that kind of stuff, so maybe there's some logic behind that. I was just trying to recapture that building.
Yeah, it's fine, I can look and just see if there's something that, some service that they could use, but I think for the time being, just shifting people over there while we're relocating would be a great option for it, because you're gonna have to have that space. And I don't know if, the smaller courtroom, we talked about the budget office and my office. Would that suffice for a smaller, just for those
Right.
small cases and, yeah.
Right, have you, since that discussion, because that came up then, is.
Yeah, we have discussed that, and they said that would probably work, and I kind of threw that out to facilities, it's one of the options they're weighing out. Yeah.
Kat, you wanted to?
Just going back to scraps real quick, we got some additional information last week. We met with facilities, and one of the other really great tactical advantages of the pool building is because it's a new construction, we can dedicate one side of it with a separate HVAC system. So any animals with any infectious diseases can be isolated and quarantined outside of the main building, which would really reduce the, spread of parvo and panleuk and some of the other really infectious diseases. So it would help us control the population even better as well, so just. One of the issues with the current facility is that you can't separate out the HVAC for the quarantined areas, right? So it would also help mitigate that issue.
So as we look at REIT one, and then, if that went into, taking up the capacity in REIT one, the fund balance. I guess I just don't want to get too low in the fund balances, because I think we're gonna see a reduction in REIT. As we move forward, we're already seeing, slowing in the housing market, we're seeing slowing in, we're not gonna see the refinancing that has occurred, that has been putting all the dollars into that. So I guess what is our capacity if we take these down to a low fund balance?
Yes, so this available balance here that we put in there, that 7.7 million, leaves 2 years of our current ongoing debt obligations in REIT one available. So we have 2 full years of REIT available.
Beyond this
spend all that.
2.2.
Correct.
So the 7.7 million, Tessa went and earmarked 2 years worth of our debt service that would remain in REIT one. The 7.7 million at the top of the sheet is what would be available to program. At the bottom of it, if you approved programming the 5.5 million, it leaves about 2.2 million left. And Tess had also done some work on both the REIT 1 and REIT 2 to say, what is the basis for calculating the projections in the out years? And Tess, you have to remind me, but you went back and looked at kind of the last 3 months of the last 3 months of collections in REIT, which has already seen a pretty dramatic downturn. And that average is still higher than what you've projected for 2023 in REIT. You've ratcheted down REIT quite a bit.
We took REIT back to our kind of 2018, so well before the pandemic levels, well before we saw housing prices go crazy and refinancing go crazy. So we based 2023 on 2018 data. So really conservative. And we think while the market is really slowed down and we're not seeing as much inventory move, our housing prices are staying higher than they were in 2018 historically. So we think we've kind of hit hopefully a sweet spot for our 2023 projections. And I've talked quite a bit with Randy Bischoff about those and what he's seeing in recording come through. And Scott had asked as well for a REIT about the difference between residential and commercial. And we are very heavy. We collect about 94% of our REIT collections from residential transactions. So that leaves only 6% for commercial, and commercial has not grown much. So I think going back to 2018, with as heavy as we are on our residential, we're well positioned for 2023's budget.
Okay, although in 18, we were still seeing refinancing happening because interest rates continue to decline. Right. And so we kept seeing that happen, which we won't be seeing that happen for a long time here. But that should be part of, I will say, what should be part of what comes before the commissioners to help us, in deciding that, because if you've already taken, I'm looking at this fund balance thinking this is what this fund balance is. And if you've already taken out 2 years worth of fund balance, then I'm not getting the whole picture as to what's really going on here.
And that's just a recommendation too, as far as what to retain.
Which I agree with, but that should be a discussion that's happening with the commissioners as we're talking about a fund balance policy. We've got to, as the commissioners, we need to see the full picture and agree that yes, we need to set aside that, because I would totally agree. That's why I was asking the question. That I don't want to do that, but that's a decision that should be collectively made with the commissioners, not at the budget level. And nothing against you guys. It's just that's got to.
And that's one nice thing about this discussion, is we can leave the $2 million unprogrammed that we have, or we can ratchet back our spending in the REIT 1 available balance. And it's completely your decision. These are just recommendations currently.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, but that's part of what I was not wanting to get to, like a zero fund balance here.
No.
And you're, so again, this spreadsheet isn't giving me the full picture, because I think it is prudent for us to have set aside and not, spend down completely, just like we don't want to spend down completely in our general fund. But it should be discussed at this level. Commissioner French is going next.
Suggestion is if you could just add just additional line on here and say reserve for whatever, or set aside for reduction kind of a deal, then I think that'll address what Mary's trying to get to and give us a clearer picture that we know that we've already got banked $2 million or whatever the dollar amount is. I think that's all you're looking at trying to accomplish.
To say what is our actual fund balance, and that we do want to be responsible and reserve some of that.
So at one point in time, we provided a REIT 1 spreadsheet like this that showed the debt service and everything that's coming out. And what Tessa was saying, that 2 years of debt service that's already been defined that we were committed to is what she took off of the top. But we can update that to give you an enhanced version of that and expand it.
Thank you. Josh?
So that's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's $11 million on that sheet, right, Gary, for REIT 1? Yeah, I mean, we were given all that information last week, and when we each got to meet with budget the week prior. So, and I know when we left last week, I mean, I don't know, I assume a lot of those were filled in based off of the sheet that we had last week too, that, you know, and I mean, I think before we left, I had even thrown out saying, you know we need to do the fair and expo, and then these other parks projects are all pretty low dollar amount. Let's just plug those in. So I assume they were probably taking my direction from last week, and that's probably why they're on the spreadsheet. So I don't think it's their fault. If you want to be mad at anybody, be mad at me. So.
Oh, no, I think I wasn't commenting on that. You know, so I was commenting on the fund balance side of it, that, I mean, that's where I was looking at, if this is all that we have available left at grade one, and we want to spend $600,000 of scraps for the overflow, then that's taking us, you know, pretty low. But if we already have set aside, which I was on a, didn't have the other sheet in front of me, you know, it's like, I guess I'm looking at what's in front of me at this point in time, thinking that, you know, and if you wanted me to look at what that balance is, then we need to have that at the same time instead of I will say, I don't have time to piece everything together at this point in time.
And in Excel, if you had looked at this in Excel, we do have the REIT one doing that calculation on that very top cell there to try to tie it all together. But yeah, when it prints, you can't see any of that. Can't see math printed.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, and this is what's getting presented to the public too. So I mean, I think we just want to make sure we're being conservative in addressing what we anticipate to know is going to be happening with REIT for the future. And so that's all I was trying to get at.
We'll do the walk that shows from here to here to get to that 7.7 million. Okay. So and I think there is some prudence too of holding back a little bit of that REIT one balance because we know there'll be asks in 2024 that will be probably similar in nature to some of these things. So while we have the capacity right now to absorb many of these asks, we do have to look at the out years, or plan for the out years as well. So thoughts on those? Is there any, the couple that I had highlighted for consideration that aren't programmed on here would be some dollars for the scraps overflow, some dollars for jail module remodels, and perhaps some of the requests in juvenile as well.
And so in juvenile, Trey had a prioritized list, didn't she?
Yep, and this is their priority list.
Okay, so it's in order of their priority list. And are all of them structured that way?
Correct. They're all, right, Tessa, they're all based on
Everything is in
what
priority
each of the
order.
departments provided for their priorities.
As I'm looking at the spreadsheet here, though, for juvenile, I'm not seeing anything filled out as funding any of these.
Correct. Those were ones that we had talked about
Okay.
as a team to go that deep because we didn't really know how much the
Yeah.
priorities would consume of the available funds. But
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said see the ones we're funding here, and I was going to say none of them have anything filled out.
no,
Oh, okay.
we wanted to give you some opportunities to make some
Gotcha.
of your own choices in here too, versus filling it all out for you.
And just to clarify too, the amount for animal control for scraps is pretty lofty. From what I've gleaned from facilities, it's not gonna be near that cost.
For the scraps.
For the pool building, yeah.
So what
Thought that the max for the building itself would be 3, not 5, which is what it shows. So.
I did have one question. As I see the dollar amount here for the gym floor in juvenile, and maybe Mary might know this. The hub, they have applied for dollars to resurface. Isn't it all the floors at the hub? Like every 2 years?
They rotate them.
Do they rotate? Okay, because I was just gonna say, because I know every 2 years we give them about $17,000, and this is 30,000, and like that's not a very large gym floor they have in juvenile. I'm just wondering, is that number
Seems like a lot.
accurate? Yeah, that seems like a lot for one gym floor.
I think I think at the hub, I believe they have wood floors that they resurface, and I think this is one of those kind of rubberized, goofy floors.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Yeah, I think it's different in the juvenile gym.
And
Okay.
how often does it have to be?
I don't know when the last time it ever was replaced.
I think she said it was more than 10 years ago when she gave her presentation.
So I guess, if we know the number on scraps is not, it's way over.
I think it's overestimated.
Can we get a more realistic number? And then I'd be okay with that coming out of REIT.
The facilities is working on it now for me, so I could have that in writing.
It's like where does the jail modular remodels come out of?
That could be,
I was just gonna say, that's for the floors. We haven't remodeled the floor for quite a while. And that's paint, overhaul, take the carpet out and, refurbish it. So,
No, which I'm just trying to figure out where do we think $900,000 is coming out of?
it is a REIT one eligibility, is that right, Tessa?
It is. And one other thing about some of the jail is we would like to also consider cost sharing a portion of that remodel with our jurisdictions that utilize our facility as well. So it wouldn't necessarily be the 100% of the 900,000, but we're a good 85% of that cost.
go back into the contract.
Yep. So we could certainly give you a little more time to noodle on these kind of remaining items if you're generally good with what's in here right now and the buckets that we've proposed them to come out of. As it stands right now, there's still about between REIT one, if the commissioners are good with which, how much fund balance to keep in there versus how much is available to use, that leaves about 3.5 million of unutilized REIT one right now. The ARP indirects, if you recall, probably by the time our contracts are awarded and spent, we could be up in the, is it 7 million, 8 million range on indirects. So this only shows what's been brought over to the general fund right now. So there's going to be extra capacity in indirects in the out years. And really, we haven't even utilized any of the investment interest right now. So there's a number of things that will still be available into 24 and beyond.
Does the justice money only apply to the sheriff's office? Or could it be utilized for the detention services as well?
The funding was prescribed to be used on impacts from legislative changes over the last couple of years. So the sheriff's office saw kind of the brunt of those legislative impacts. I don't know if the jail saw any legislative changes in the last few years that made, would be applicable for a freezer to be replaced or things like that. If you have to keep more food on hand or something like that, if the laws changed around.
I just asked a question,
Yeah.
so it could be applied in both areas, right? I mean, if there was changes on both sides, right?
Yes, yeah, or any court programming or anything like that. Yeah,
Programs.
we've struggled to find any other uses in the criminal justice system. The sheriff's office really saw the majority of those impacts. And so a lot of their equipment needs have changed, both in the 2022 budget and then in the 2023 budget.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that, you know, we've got the amount in juvenile, we've got the whole building and scraps, and the jail modular remodels. So we need to figure out where
Some
those,
additional considerations. Yep.
and then the rest is not as higher priority.
Yeah, I think the remaining things in the sheriff department, we would recommend kind of looking towards their operating budget for trying to absorb. Everything else is fairly well accounted for except for the ones that you've identified.
So could we use the ARP investment interest for juvenile?
Yeah, right, yeah.
You can use that for anything you want.
Yep, that's
just
pretty
a
well unrestricted.
Transfer to general fund unrestricted.
I did just email Scott and Jeff because this hit me, but we had a while ago talked about security updates on campus that were needed, and we haven't reflected any of those on this. And so I just pinged you guys with an email and said, could that be an indirect thought? So I don't know if that's something that we want to take into consideration, but if we are getting ready to start earmarking that money, that is one that hit me about 10 minutes ago when I was sitting in this room, that we don't have any funding necessary for those right now.
That's right. Steve had identified some of those in his budget request, right?
Yep.
And we didn't.
They're not reflected
We
in
need to,
this.
we need to go grab that and share that with the commissioners as well, what's in here. And quick overview of those, Ashley, again, are.
It's general campus updates. So, for example, the Public Works building right now is completely open to the public. There's no way for us to lock it down in the event of an emergency. There's no quick locking mechanisms on those doors. For example, in HR this year, I put it in the HR department budget, but we installed the ability to have the doors locked, a intercom system to have people come in, panic buttons in the event that we had some sort of active shooter event. Our only truly secure buildings right now are the ones that have security on site. And so we'd been looking at it from a full campus perspective here, but also in some of our outlying locations, and really starting to ask ourselves, how do we enable ourselves to be set up in the event that there is some sort of event that occurs, that we are able to quickly go into a lockdown and protect ourselves and also our constituents. Also, right now, we have one system through our phones, it's called Red Alert, that is not fully up and running. So if we do have an event, it's very difficult to notify all of our locations. There's not a general call system, a flashing light system. So we have, in the event something were to occur, some pretty high exposure in the majority of our buildings right now. Additionally, our entire campus is lit for the minimum requirements. So if you walk around here after 4:30 today, you're gonna notice how dark it is. So we had been looking at, could we add some lighting? Much like you see on college campuses, some of those blue light areas where if you are attacked or something happens, there's kind of a safety zone to get to so that you can push a button. Looking at maybe adding a couple of those on campus. As well as looking at some of our parking lots and determining whether or not there really should be some sort of fencing around it. So pretty large scale project. We really kind of did what everybody else did and looked at what's top priority all the way down. But there's a lot of need for extra security on this campus that is related to the infrastructure itself, not necessarily to people. I wouldn't recommend armed guards walking around or anything like that, but I do think that there's as we look at the world around us and the events that continue to happen, we have some pretty good exposure at most of our locations on campus and off campus.
Okay, so we'll gather those for this list as well, just to make sure that we have the understanding of what those numbers are and contemplating where the funding could possibly be absorbed now.
So, which takes me to, so where are we at on supplemental budget requests? Because where are we on balancing the budget at this point in time?
So we've been working on some different ideas on it with the public roundtable that's going to be shared tomorrow. Those are going to be we're staying with a consistent what was presented in the preliminary budget, so we didn't create confusion for the public. So that will be our operating expenditures for the preliminary budget that was presented, and then after that's done with the public roundtable, we'll circle back with each of the commissioners and show you kind of how we're closing some of the gap and what some of our recommendations are to getting to a balanced budget well in advance of the 29th, which is the next time we come and talk budget with you all.
So you might already have this covered in this year's budget and stuff, but I'm just gonna ask just in case. So I think you've got in this year's budget, the remodeling cost and everything for the new commissioner's offices. But do you also have included in there new furniture and all that kind of stuff that's gonna be needed over there as well?
Yep, in 2022.
Okay, I just curious, and all of that's gonna be in Ritzville?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And north of Newport.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments, Josh?
Thank you for the feedback.
Okay, so that takes us, Scott, to you. Got any miscellaneous or any
I've got-
other sessions?
I've got two. I'm gonna put Kat on the spot. Quickly for one, Operation Greenlight.
Yep.
Can you give a quick logistical overview for the commissioners?
Absolutely. At 4 o'clock today, we're going to be lighting, well, it's exactly at 4:22. We're gonna be lighting up the county courthouse green, in recognition of our veterans, and this is Veterans Day week. And so, it's a national initiative from the National Association of Counties, and we've followed suit. Gil, I just have to tell you, I sat here watching. There's guys out there in the cold and the snow getting all the lights ready. I can see them from right here. And so Gil's team has done a great job getting everything ready for it. We're going to have colors presented at 4, and then an invocation by one of the sheriff's department chaplains. And then Colonel Brian Newberry, retired, is going to be the keynote speaker. It's going to be pretty quick, from about 4 to 4:30. The lights will go green at 4:22. And then the Veterans Mobile bus is going to be here for if anybody wants to come out, and it's basically an outreach event. We're hoping to get some veterans from all of our different outreaches that we've done to kind of come this way and see that the county really is going all out to show their support for veterans. So we're pretty excited about it. So if you can stick around, I think it'll be pretty neat. It's gonna be cold, hence the huge coat and scarf I've got with me today. But I think it's gonna be a really beautiful thing to honor our veterans in that way. And the courthouse will stay green for the rest of the week, and then back to normal. So maybe even a little dimmer. Sorry, Ash.
Where will the event be at? Over by?
Right
the
over here.
flag?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And we've got a couple of pop-up tents coming just in case the weather, but we're not supposed to get any more weather today, so. Thank you.
And then the final one, this is more for the public who's watching than the commissioners, because you already know this. Tomorrow, under the consent agenda, there's a notice of public hearing for the commissioners to establish property tax decisions. Those are statutorily required to be taken by the end of November. So this is just a notice for a public hearing on the 29th. And on the notice, it shows the various options the commissioners have to be able to consider on that 29th hearing. So I just wanted to call that out for anyone who had looked at our agenda and saw that there's no action tomorrow. It's just a notice for the 29th. That's all I had.
Thank you. No executive sessions.
Nothing for me.
Any other
for me.
miscellaneous? No.
Probably only by way of an update, the Building Code Council, in its infinite wisdom, or lack thereof, last Friday voted to move forward with the residential energy code, which will effectively eliminate natural gas in new construction for a heating source. They try and nuanced it by saying that you can use natural gas as a backup, but I don't know anybody in the right mind that would provide an all-electric, and then by the way, pay for all the cost to bring natural gas in that you might be using as a backup. It's just finessing an ultimate decision that says they're gonna get rid of natural gas. I'm told, I don't know firsthand, that there'll be litigation number of violations in the process, but how successful this would be, I have no idea, but at least that decision was made last Friday, despite, it was a close vote, it was 9 to 5. So we were able to get five people to vote against it, but 9 was the majority, and there we go. So as snow was falling outside and it got cold, and I was telling him it's gonna be down to single digits here this week, they didn't seem to care, so they just went ahead and voted it in anyway, so. And it's predominantly an east-west decision.
Because once you get below 50-some degrees, a heat pump doesn't.
It's below 20 degrees. Below 20 degrees, heat pumps don't work, and then you need an auxiliary. But, you know, I told the council last week that, you know, we had several thousand people that were out of electricity. And if you had natural gas, like in my house, I have natural gas water heater, natural gas fireplace, natural gas stove, and furnace. And if the electricity goes out, I can still use my fireplace, my stove, and my water heater. I can stay in my house. If I'm all electric, I'm homeless, and I'm gonna be down at Camp Hope. So that did not seem to resonate with them. They didn't care because it doesn't get into single digits that often over in Seattle in the I-5 corridor. So many of us, we continue to pray for the big earthquake. So anyway, that's just how it went on Friday.
Very good.
So.
Anything else, Josh? Good. Okay. Thank you all very much. We will adjourn and see everybody tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Unless later today at the, people are gonna be in attendance.
A question for you.